Chapter 11. An hour later, Sholto and I were sitting in two lovely but uncomfortable chairs around a small white table. The room was elegant, if a little too pink and gold for my tastes. There had been wine in a tray of hors d'oeuvres waiting on the table. The wine was a very sweet dessert wine. It complemented the cheese on the tray but clashed with the caviar. Of course, I'd never tasted anything that could make caviar palatable. No matter how expensive it was, it still tasted like fish eggs. Sholto seemed to like caviar and the wine. Champagne would have been more appropriate, but I've never liked it, he said. Are we celebrating something? I asked. An alliance, I hope. I took a minute sip of the too sweet wine and looked at him. What sort of alliance? Between the two of us? That much I'd assumed. The big question, Sholto, is why would you want an alliance with me? You're third in line to the throne. His face had become very closed, very careful, as if he didn't want me to know what he was thinking. And, I said. He blinked those triple golden eyes at me. Why wouldn't a she want to join himself to the woman who was only 2 steps away from the throne? Normally, that would be fine reasoning, but you and I both know that the only reason I'm still third in line for the throne is that my father got the Queen's oath before he died. She'd have had me disqualified on the grounds of my mortality alone, except for that. I have no standing at the court, Sholto. I am the first princess of the line who has no magic. He sat his wine glass carefully on the table. You are one of the best of all of us at personal glamour, he said. True, but it's the greatest of my powers. For God's sake, I am still called Nick Esses, daughter of Esses, a title that I should have lost after childhood when I came into my power. Except I didn't come into my power. I may never come into my power, Sholto. That alone could have gotten me removed from the line of succession. Except for the oath the Queen made to your father, Sholto said. Yes. I am aware how much your aunt loathes you, Meredith, much the same way she loathes me. I set the wine glass down, tired of pretending to enjoy it. You have magic enough for a court title. You're not mortal. He looked at me, and it was a long, hard, almost harsh look. Don't be coy, Meredith. You know exactly why the Queen can't stand the sight of me. I met that hard glance, but it was uncomfortable. I did know all the court knew. Say it, Meredith. Say it out loud. The Queen disapproves of your mixed blood. He nodded. Yes. He seemed almost relieved. The harshness in his eyes had been uneasy to see, but at least it had been genuine. For all I knew, everything else was false. I wanted to see what truly lay behind that handsome face. But that's not why, Sholto. There's more mixed blood among the she-royals now than pure. Fine, he said. She disapproves of my father's bloodline. It's not the fact that your father is a night flyer, Sholto. He frowned. If you have a point, make it. Except for the odd pointy ear, until you came along, she-genetics won out no matter what we mated with. Genetics, he said. I forget that you are our first modern college graduate. I smiled. Father was hoping I'd be a doctor. You can't heal with your touch. What kind of doctor is that? He took a big drink of wine, as if he were still agitated. Someday, I must take you on a tour of a modern hospital, I said. Whatever you wish to show me would be a pleasure. Whatever real emotion had almost peeked through vanished in a wave of double entendre. I ignored the double meaning and went back to digging. I'd seen real emotion. I wanted to see more of it. If I was going to risk my life, I needed to see Sholto without the masks that the court taught us to wear. Until you, all the she looked like she no matter what we mated with. I think the Queen sees you as proof that the she blood is growing weak, just as my mortality shows the blood is thinning. That handsome face grew tight with anger. The unseelie preach that all fae are beautiful, but some of us are only beautiful for a night. We are diversions, but nothing more. I watched the anger eat across his shoulders, down his arms. His muscles tightened as the anger flowed over him. My mother, and he spat that last word out, thought she would have a night of pleasure and pay no price. I was that price. He bit off the words, rage intensifying the light in his eyes so that the rings of color in them blazed like yellow flame and molten running gold. I'd broken through that so careful exterior and found a nerve. "I would say that you're the one that paid the price, not your mother," I said. "Once she gave birth to you, she went back to the court, to her life." He looked at me, the rage still naked on his face. I talked carefully to that anger because I didn't want it to spill over on me. But I liked the anger. It was real, not some mood calculated to get him something. He hadn't planned this mood. It had just come over him. I liked that. I liked that a lot. One of the things I'd loved about Rowan had been that his emotions were so close to the surface. He never pretended anything he did not feel. Of course, that was the same trait that had allowed him to go off to the sea with his new sealskin and never bother to say goodbye. No one was perfect. "And she left me with my father," Sholto said. He looked down at the table, then slowly raised those extraordinary eyes to me. "Do you know how old I was before I saw another she?" I shook my head. "I was 5. 5 years old before I saw anyone with skin and eyes like mine." He stopped talking, eyes distant with remembering. "Tell me," I said softly. His voice came soft, as if he were talking to himself. "Agnes had taken me into the woods to play on a dark, moonless night. I wanted to ask if Agnes was the hag Black Agnes that I'd met tonight, but I let him talk. There'd be time for questions when his mood had changed and he stopped telling his secrets. It had been surprisingly easy to get him to open up to me. Usually, when it's this easy to peel away someone's protections, they want to talk, need to talk. "I saw something shining through the trees, as if the moon had come down to earth. I asked Agnes, 'What is that?' She wouldn't tell me, just took my hand and led me closer to the light. At first, I thought they were human, except humans didn't glow like they had fire beneath their skins. Then the woman turned her face toward us and her eyes." His voice trailed off, and there was such a mixture of wonder and pain in him that I almost let it go. But I didn't. I wanted to know, if he wanted to tell me. "Her eyes?" I prompted. "Her eyes glowed, burned blue, darker blue, then green. I was 5, so it wasn't her nakedness, or his body on top of hers, but the wonderment of that white skin and those swirling eyes, like my eyes, like my skin." He stared past me as if I weren't there. "Agnes dragged me away before they saw us. I was full of questions. She told me to ask my father." He blinked and took a deep breath as if he were literally coming back from someplace else. "My father explained about the she, and that I was one of them. My father raised me to believe I was she. I could not be what he was." Sholto gave a harsh laugh. "I cried the first time I realized I would never have wings." He looked at me frowning. "I've never told anyone at court that story. Is that some kind of magic that you have over me?" He didn't actually believe it was a spell, or he'd be more upset, maybe even frightened. "Who else at the court but me would understand what the story meant?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Yes, though your body is not marred as mine, you too do not belong. They won't let you belong." That last was said for both of us, I think. His hands lay on the table so tightly clasped that they were mottled. I touched his hands, and he jerked away as if I'd hurt him. He'd slid his hands out of reach, but stopped in mid-motion. I watched the effort it took for him to put his hands back within my reach. He acted like someone who expected to be hurt. I covered his large hands with one of mine, or covered as much as I could. He smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen, because this one was uncertain, not sure of its welcome. I don't know what he saw on my face, but whatever it was, it reassured him, because he opened his hands and took my hand in his, raising it slowly to his lips. He didn't so much kiss my hand as press his mouth to it. It was a surprisingly tender gesture. Loneliness can be a bond stronger than most. Who else at either court understood our hearts better than each other? Not love or friendship, but a bond nonetheless. His gaze rose to meet mine. As he raised his face from my hand, the look in his eyes was one I rarely saw among the she, open, raw. There was a need in his eyes so large it was like staring into an endless void, a deep yawning pit of some missing thing. It made his eyes wild like some creature's or a feral child's, something untamed but badly wounded. Did my eyes ever look like that? I hoped not. He let go of my hand slowly, reluctantly. I have never been with another she, Meredith. Do you understand what that means? I understood, probably better than he did, because the only thing worse than never was to have had it and be denied it. But I kept my voice neutral because I was beginning to fear where we were heading, and no matter how much sympathy I had with him, it wasn't worth being tortured to death. You wonder what it would be like? He shook his head. No. I crave the sight of pale flesh stretched underneath me. I want my shine matched by another. I want that, Meredith, and you can give it to me. He was heading where I'd feared. I told you, Sholto, I won't risk death by torture for any pleasure. No one, nothing is worth that. I meant it. The Queen joys in making her guards watch her with her lovers. Some refuse to watch, but most of us stay on the off chance that she may beckon us to join. You are my bodyguards. Don't you want to guard my body? He did a fair imitation of her voice. Even when it is meant for cruelty, the love of two she is still a wondrous thing. I would give my soul for it. I gave him my best blank face. I don't have any use for your soul, Sholto. What else can you offer me that would be worth risking death by torture? If you are my she-lover, Meredith, then the Queen will know what you mean to me. I will make sure she understands that if anything happens to you, that she will lose the Slua's loyalty. She can't afford that right now. Why not make this deal with other more powerful she-women? The women of Prince Kel's guard have him to have sex with, and unlike the Queen, Kel keeps them busy. When I left, some of the women were beginning to refuse Kel's bed. Sholto smiled happily. The movement has become quite popular. I raised eyebrows. Are you saying that Kel's little harem is turning him down? More and more of them. Sholto still looked pleased. Then why not make this invitation to one of them? They're all more powerful than I am. Perhaps it's what you said earlier, Meredith. None of them would understand me as you do. I think you underestimate them. But what could Kel possibly be doing to them that's making them leave him in droves? The Queen herself is a sexual sadist, but her guardsmen would crawl over broken glass to bed her. What is Kel offering that is worse than that? I didn't expect an answer, but I couldn't even begin to think of anything that bad. The smile faded from Sholto's face. The Queen did that once, he said. What? I asked, frowning. Made one of us strip and crawl over broken glass. If he made it without showing pain, then she'd fuck him. I blinked. I'd heard worse. Hell, I'd seen worse. But part of me wanted to know who it was, so I asked, Who was it? He shook his head. We of the guard have sworn to keep the humiliations among ourselves. Our pride, if not our bodies, survives the better for it. His eyes looked lost again. Again, I wondered what Kel could be doing that was worse than the Queen's games. Why not make this offer to a more powerful she-woman who isn't a member of the Prince's Guard? I asked. He gave a faint smile. There are women at court who are not members of the Prince's Guard, Meredith. They would not touch me before I joined the Guard. They fear bringing more perverse creatures into the world. He laughed, and it had a wild sound to it, almost like crying. It hurt to hear it. That's what the Queen calls me, her perverse creature. Sometimes simply creature. In a few centuries, I will be like frost and her darkness. I will be her creature. He gave that painful laugh again. I will risk much to keep that from happening. Does she really need the Slua's backing that much? So much that she'd give up my death, give up punishing us for going against her strictest taboo? I shook my head. No, Sholto. She can't let this stand. If we find a way around her celibacy taboo, then others will try. It will be like the first crack in a dam. Eventually it breaks. She is losing control, Meredith, losing her hold on the court. These 3 years have not been good ones for her. The court is splitting under the weight of her erratic behavior, and Prince Kel's growing... He seemed at a loss for words, then finally said, When he comes into power, Kel is going to make Andeas look sane. It will be like Caligula after Tiberius. Are you saying, if we think it's bad now, we ain't seen nothing yet? I tried to make him smile, and failed. He turned haunted eyes to me. The Queen cannot afford to lose the support of the Slua. Trust me on this, Meredith. I have no desire to end up at the Queen's mercy any more than you do. The Queen's mercy had become a saying among us. If you feared something, you said, I'd rather be at the Queen's mercy than do that. It meant that nothing scared you more. What do you want of me, Sholto? I want you, he said, his gaze very direct. I had to smile. You don't want me. You want a she in your bed. Remember that Griffin rejected me because I was not she enough for him. Griffin was a fool. I smiled, and it made me think of Uther's words earlier that night, that Rowan was a fool. If everyone was a fool for leaving me, why did they keep doing it? I looked at him and tried to be just as direct. I've never been with a night flyer. It is considered perverted by those that consider nothing perverse, Sholto said, and his voice was bitter. I would not expect you to have experience with us. Us. An interesting pronoun. If you asked me what I was she, not human, not brownie. I was she. And if you pushed me, I was unseelie, for better or worse, even though I could claim the blood of both courts. But I would never have said us when speaking of anything but unseelie she. After my aunt, our beloved Queen, tried to drown me when I was 6, Father made sure I had my own she bodyguards. One of them was a crippled night flyer, Batar. Sholto nodded. He lost a wing in the last real battle we fought on American soil. We can grow back most of our body parts, so it was a grave wound. Batar stayed in my room at night. He never left my side when I was a child. Father taught me chess, but Batar taught me how to beat Father. It made me smile. He still speaks well of you, Sholto said. I started to ask, then shook my head. No, he would never have suggested that you do this. He would never have risked my safety or yours. You see, he spoke well of you too, King Sholto. The best king the Slua had had in 200 years. That's what he used to say. I'm flattered. You know what your people think of you? I tried to read that face. The need was there, but need could mask so many things. What of the hags, your little harem? What of them? He asked, but there was a look in his eyes that gave lie to his casual words. They wanted to hurt me to keep me from you. What do you think they'll do if you actually bed me? I am their king. They will do as they are told. I laughed then, but it wasn't bitter, just ironic. You are a king of a Fae people, Sholto. They never do quite what you tell them, or quite what you think they will. From she to pixie, they are free things. Take for granted their obedience, and you do so at your peril. Like the Queen has done for a millennium. He made it half question, half statement. I smiled, nodding. As the king of the Seelie court has done for even longer. I am a new king compared to them, and not quite so arrogant. Then tell me truly, what will your hag lovers do if you desert them for me? He seemed to think about it for a minute, long and slow. Then he looked at me. His face was serious. I don't know. I almost laughed. You are new at being king. I've never heard one of them admit ignorance before. Not knowing a thing is not ignorance. Feigning knowledge you don't have can be, he said. Wise as well as modest. How terribly unique for Fae royalty. I remembered a question I'd wanted to ask. The Agnes that took you into the woods as a boy, your nanny, is she Black Agnes? Yes, he said. I fought not to frown. Your ex-nanny is now your lover? She has not aged, he said, and I am all grown up now. Growing up around immortal beings is confusing, I admit, but there are still Fae that helped raise me that I don't think of in that way. As there are among the Slua for me, but Agnes is not one of them. I wanted to ask why, but didn't. First, it was none of my business. Second, I might not understand the answer even if he gave it to me. How do you know the Queen intends to execute me for certain? Back to the important topic. Because I was sent to Los Angeles to kill you. He said it like it meant nothing. No emotion, no regret, just fact. My heart beat a little faster, my breath catching in my throat. I had to concentrate to ease the air out without making it noticeable. "If I don't agree to sleep with you, then you carry out the sentence?" "I gave my oath that I meant you no harm. I meant it." "You would go against the Queen for my sake?" "The same reasoning that keeps us safe if we bed each other keeps me safe if I leave you alive. She needs my slua more than she needs to be vindictive." He seemed so certain of that last part, certain of what he was certain of, uncertain of everything else. Like most of us, if we're honest. I looked at that strong face, the jaw a little wide for my taste, the bones of the cheek a little too sculpted. I liked a softer look to my men, but he was undeniably handsome. His hair was a perfect white, thick and straight, held back in a loose ponytail. The hair fell to his knees, like one of the older Shi, even though Sholto was only about 200 years, give or take. The shoulders were broad, the chest looked good under the white button-down shirt. The shirt fell absolutely smooth, and I wondered if he were using some sort of glamour to make it so, because I knew that what lay under the shirt was not smooth. "The offer is very unexpected, Sholto. I'd like some time to think about it, if I may." "Until tomorrow night," he said. I nodded and stood. He stood as well. I found myself staring at his chest and stomach, trying to see that movement I'd noticed on the street. Nothing showed. He was wasting glamour on keeping it hidden. "I don't know if I can do this," I said. "What?" he asked. I motioned at him. "I saw you once without a shirt when I was much younger. The sight stayed with me." His face paled, eyes hardening. He was throwing his walls back in place. "I understand. The thought of touching me frightens you. I do understand, Meredith." He let out a long breath. It was a pretty thought while it lasted. He turned away from me, gathering his long coat from the back of the chair where he'd laid it. The heavy tail of hair lay like a white, furred stripe down his body. "Sholto," I said. He didn't turn around, just held the length of hair over one shoulder while he put on his coat. "I didn't say no, Sholto." He turned then. His face was still closed, careful, all the emotions I'd worked so hard to find buried again. "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying no sex tonight, but I can't say yes. I'll have sex with you until I see everything." "Everything?" He made it a question again. "Now who's being coy?" I said. I watched the idea take shape on his face, in his eyes. A strange little smile played on his lips. "Are you asking to see me naked?" "Not whole of you." I had to smile at the look on his face. "But down to your thighs, yes, please. I have to see how I truly feel about your extras." He smiled, and it was warm with an edge of uncertainty. It was his real smile, that edge of charm and fear. "That is the kindest way anyone has ever described them." "If I can't be with you in joy and shared pleasure, then your dream of matching your glow with another falls apart. A she does not glow for things that are duty and not pleasure." He nodded. "I understand." "I hope so, because it's more than seeing you nude. I need to touch and be touched to see if—" I spread my hands wide. "If I can do this." "But no sex tonight." His voice was as close to playful as I'd ever heard it. "You dream of she flesh and have never had it. I have had it, and for 3, nearly 4 years, I've gone without. I miss home, Sholto. Strange and perverse as it is, I miss it. If I agree to this, then I get a she-lover and home, not to mention I'm escaping a death sentence. You are not a fate worse than death, Sholto." "Some have thought so over the years." He tried to make it a joke, but his eyes gave him away. "That's why I need to see what I'm getting myself into." "Do I raise the question of love, or is that too naive for a king and a princess?" he asked. I smiled, but this time it was sad. I tried love once. It betrayed me. "Griffin is a worthless thing, Meredith, unworthy of such depth of emotion, and certainly incapable of returning it." "I found that out, eventually," I said. "Love is grand while it lasts, Sholto, but it doesn't last." We looked at each other. I wondered if my eyes were as tired and full of regret as his. "Am I supposed to argue with you and tell you some love does last?" Sholto asked. Are you going to? He smiled and shook his head. No. I held my hand out to him. No lies, Sholto, not even the pretty ones. His hand was very warm wrapped around mine. Let me take you to bed and see what I'm bargaining for. He let me lead him toward the bed. Do I get to see what I'm bargaining for? I pulled him backward toward the bed so I could watch his face. If you like. A look passed through his eyes that was neither she nor human, nor Slua, but simply male. I like, he said. Chapter 12. I let go of his hand so I could crawl onto the bed, still working backwards so I could watch him. I took the gun out of my waistband and slid it under one of the pillows, then lay back in the middle of the bed, propping myself up on my elbows. Sholto stood beside the bed looking at me. He had a strange half-smile on his face. His eyes looked uncertain, not unhappy, just uncertain. You look terribly pleased with yourself, he said. It's never a bad thing to see a handsome man naked for the first time. His smile vanished. Handsome? I've never had anyone who knew what lay under the shirt call me that before. I let my gaze speak for me. I lingered over his face, the eyes, the strong, nearly perfect nose, the thin, wide mouth. The rest of the body looked wonderful, but I knew at least part of what I was looking at was magically enhanced. I just didn't know how much. But I kept my gaze on the parts that I was pretty sure were real, like the slender width of his hips, the strong length of legs. Until I saw him without the pants, I wasn't sure what the bulge in the pants was, so I passed that by in mind as well as by eye. The Queen was right. It was a shame. He truly was magnificent. I fantasized about a she-woman looking at me like that. He still looked too solemn. Like what? I asked. I made the question low, sexual, teasing. That made him smile. Like I'm something to eat. I smiled and made it everything he wanted it to be, everything he needed it to be. Eat, eh? Lose the coat and the shirt, and maybe we'll get to that. No sex tonight, remember, he said. How about just no orgasm? He threw back his head and laughed, a loud, joyous sound. He looked at me with shining eyes, and it wasn't magic that made them glitter, just laughter. He looked younger, more relaxed. I realized that with his white hair and skin, those gold eyes, that he'd be welcomed at the Sealy court. If he could keep his shirt on, they'd never suspect. The laughter faded round the edges. Now you look solemn, he said. I was just thinking that you look more Sealy court than I do. He frowned. You mean the blood-auburn hair? And my lack of height, and the breasts are a little too plentiful for she-style. He grinned then, wide and sudden. It has to be the women who are complaining about the breasts. No man would dream of it. That made me smile. You're right. My mother, my aunt, my cousins. They are just jealous, he said. Pretty to think so, I said. He let the gray overcoat fall to the floor, then undid a button of his cuff. He watched my face while he did it. He undid the other sleeve and moved to the first shirt button, the second, fanning the cloth to expose a triangle of white gleaming skin. A third button, and the first swell of chest muscle came into view. His fingers went to the fourth button, but he didn't undo it. I would ask for a kiss now, before you see. I would have asked why, but I thought I knew. He was afraid that once I saw all of him, he wouldn't get his kiss. I crawled across the bed toward him. Sholto put his hands on the bed and lowered himself to his knees. He moved down until his chin was nearly touching the bed, his hands flat on the bedspread. I stayed on all fours above him. He gazed up at me, and I lowered my face toward his in a sort of push-up position. I gave him his kiss. A soft brush of lips, and Sholto started to pull away. I touched his face gently. Not yet, I said. Sholto was right. Once I saw all his extras, he might not get another kiss. If it was the only touch of she hands that he would ever know, I wanted it to be memorable. A kiss couldn't make up for not having ever felt the touch of she flesh, but it was all I could offer. In his own way, he was as alone as Uther. Sholto laid his chin back on the bed, rolling his eyes up at me. He waited for me patiently, totally passive, waiting for me to do whatever I was going to do. In that instant, I had another question answered. If I was going to tie myself to any one person for a lifetime, we'd have to have more in common than just she blood. He'd have to share my love of pain. I lay flat on the bed so that our faces were even. "Open your mouth just a little," I said. He did it without question. I liked that. I kissed his upper lip, softly, gently. I used my tongue to open his mouth wider, then used lips and tongue to explore his mouth. He was completely passive at first, letting me feed softly at his mouth. Then he began to kiss me back. He kissed slowly, almost hesitantly, as if it were his first time, and I knew it wasn't. Then his mouth pressed against mine harder, more demanding. I bit his lower lip, gently but firmly. He made a small noise in his throat and rose to his knees, pulling me with him, hands on my arms. His kiss mashed against my lips. The kiss was hard enough it hurt, and I had to open my mouth wider, letting his lips, his tongue, his mouth inside mine completely, as deeply as he wanted to probe and lick and feed, just to keep from being bruised. He pushed me back against the bed, and I let him, but I noticed that he kept his body above mine, using his hands to prop himself up so only our mouths touched. I drew back from the kiss enough to look down the line of his body. I could feel his body above mine like a trembling line of energy. It was as if the weight of his body was already pressed against mine, as if I could already feel the heaviness of him against me. His aura, his magic, had substance like a second body pressing outward from him. The press of power trapped my breath in my throat, brought my pulse racing. His magic drew the blood in my body like a magnet draws metal. Even with Rowan covered in Branwen's tears, it hadn't been like this. It had been wondrous, but it hadn't been this. And this was what I wanted, needed, craved. Sholto stared down at me with a kind of soft wonder on his face. "What is that?" I realized he could feel my power as I felt his. I could have simply said magic, but the last time I'd been with another she had been Griffin, and he had explained to me how my power was a lesser glow, a paltry thing. Once I'd believed him. Now I didn't. I had to ask, because I might never be with another she. I might never be able to answer the doubts that Griffin had put in my mind. "What does it feel like?" I asked. "Warm, like heat rising off your body, pressing against my skin." He balanced on one arm, using his free hand to caress the air between us, like he was stroking something that had shape, weight. The feel of him stroking his hand along my aura made me close my eyes, my body writhing under that not touch. He pushed his hand through the energy, and even with closed eyes, I knew where his hand was. "It clings to my hand like it's a ball of something that sucks against my skin as I reach into it," Sholto said, voice breathy, filled with the wonder his face had shown. I felt his hand thrust through the power, as if my body were underwater, and his hand brought cool air with it. His hand didn't just touch my side, it breached my shields, forced his magic inside me. It brought my eyes wide open, froze my breath in my throat. It forced me to lash out with my own power, to cover it like holding a hand over a wound. His body jerked at the touch of my magic. He looked at me with half-parted lips, his pulse thudding like a trapped thing against the fragile skin of his throat. I had no idea what I was missing. I nodded, staring up at him, flat on the bed, his hand like a throbbing weight over my ribs. "This is only the beginning," I said, and my voice had fallen to a hoarse whisper. I wasn't trying to sound sexy. It was all the voice left me with the press of him above me. In that moment, I couldn't think of any deformity that would keep me from saying yes. I reached for his shirt. He moved his hand off of me so he could support his weight on both hands and I could reach the buttons of his shirt. I undid the next button. Nothing popped out. I undid another button. The power wavered like heat rising from pavement. "Let go of the illusion, Sholto. Let me see." His voice was a whisper. "I'm afraid." I stared up at him. "Do you really think I want to lose a chance at this? I want to end this exile, Sholto. I'm tired of pretending, of settling. I want it all back." I caressed a hand over the front of his throat, and the mix of our power flowed behind my hand like an invisible veil. She-flesh, pleasure to equal mine, to walk into the hollow hills and be welcome. I want to go home, Sholto. Drop your glamour and let me see what you look like. He did what I asked. The tentacles spilled out of the shirt, and analogies like nest of snakes or the spill of intestines when you open someone's gut came to mind. I froze, and this time when my breath caught in my throat, it wasn't from passion. Sholto started to back away immediately, standing, turning so I couldn't see. I had to grab his arm to stop him. My reaction had shut down the magic between us, or rather his reaction to my reaction had. His arm was just an arm under my hand, warm and alive, but nothing more. I gripped his arm tight with both my hands. I tried to turn him back toward me, but he resisted. I rose on my knees, keeping one hand on his arm, but reached across his body to grab the far side of his shirt. Nothing touched me as I reached across his body, and there should have been a lot of things touching me. He'd called the glamour back in place. I wasn't feeling what was really there. I dragged him back around to face me. The shirt was open to mid-stomach. The chest and stomach were pale, muscular, smooth, perfect. I undid another button, and the stomach that showed was cobblestone, like an ad for the aftershot in a gym commercial. Sholto let me unbutton the shirt and pull it out enough that he was exposed down to the leather of his belt, but he wouldn't look at me. I guess if you're going to hide behind glamour, it might as well be handsome. He did look at me then, and he looked angry. If this was my true appearance, you wouldn't turn from me. If this was your real appearance, you'd have never become king of the host. Something passed through his eyes, something I couldn't read, but anything was better than the anger tinged with bitterness. I would have been a noble of the She Court, he said. A lord, nothing better. Your mother's bloodline isn't good enough for a greater title. I am a lord, he said. I nodded. Yes, on your own power, your own merit. The Queen could not let such a power walk away from our court without a title. He smiled, but it was bitter, and that anger crept back into his eyes. Are you saying it's better to rule in hell than serve in heaven? I shook my head. Never, but I am saying that you have everything your mother's blood could have given you, and you are a king. He stared down at me, his face that arrogant mask again, the one I saw so often at court. My mother's blood could have given me you. I haven't turned you down, I said. I saw the look on your face, felt the reluctance in your body. You don't have to say it out loud for it to be true. I started to pull his shirt out of his pants. He grabbed my hands. Don't. If you walk away now, then it's finished. Drop your illusions, Sholto. Let me see. I did that. He jerked the shirt out of my hand so hard that he almost dragged me off the bed as he moved away. It'd be nice if I could have embraced you without flinching. I am sorry that I couldn't, but give a girl a chance. The first look is a little overwhelming. He shook his head. You're right. I am king of the Slua. I will not be humiliated. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him. He looked perfect, if a little sulky, but it wasn't real, and I'd spent the last few years hiding, pretending. Pretense, no matter how pretty, can grow very old. Though they rejected him, there was no one that epitomized the Unseelie court better than Sholto did. A combination of unbelievable beauty and horror, not just side by side, but entwined. One could not exist without the other. In his way, Sholto was the perfect marriage of all the court stood for, and they rejected him because they feared that he was indeed the ultimate Unseelie she. I doubted they thought of it that clearly, not in so many words, but that was what frightened them about Sholto. Not that he was alien, but that he wasn't alien. I can't give my word that I won't turn away a second time, but I can give my word that I will try. He looked at me, arrogance like a shield in his eyes. That's not good enough. It's the best I have to offer. Is fear of rejection really worth losing your first touch of she-flesh so quickly? Doubt flickered in his eyes. If you can't stomach it. Something about the phrase amused him, but not in a happy way. And can I call glamour and... I finished when his voice trailed off. "Yes, we can." He nodded. "That is the closest I have ever come to begging." I laughed. "Lucky you." He looked puzzled then, and it was almost a relief to see the real Sholto peeking through that careful mask. "I don't understand." "Your magic is powerful enough that you probably don't." It was my voice that held bitterness now. I shook it off, literally shaking my head, sending my hair sliding around my face. I held my hands out to him. "Come here." Distrust showed on his face. I guess I couldn't blame him, but I was getting tired of holding his emotional hand. I didn't want to hurt him, but I wasn't sure I wanted to tie myself to him forever. It wasn't the tentacles. It was the heavy emotions that seemed to swing back and forth so quickly. He was going to be a high-maintenance partner when it came to his feelings. Men like that are so damned exhausting that I usually avoid them. But Sholto could offer me things that the others couldn't. He could give me back my home. For that, I could shovel emotional shit for a while. But truthfully, it was almost a bigger mark against him than his extras. "Drop the shirt and come here, or don't. It's your choice." "You sound impatient," he said. I shrugged. "A little." I motioned him closer with my hands. He slid the shirt off his shoulders to spill to the floor. A flurry of emotions crossed his face. He finally settled on defiance. Fine with me, because I knew that whatever was on his face wasn't how he really felt. He'd use a mask until he was sure of his welcome. He dropped the glamour. Chapter 13. I tried to watch all of him as he walked toward me, but finally gave up and stared. The tentacles were the same gleaming white as the rest of him. There was the faintest marbling effect in the thickest tentacles, and I knew from Batar that those were the muscular arms, the tentacles that did the heavy work. There were longer, thinner tentacles in groupings around the ribs and upper stomach. They were the fingers, but 100 times more sensitive than a she's. Then just above the belly button was a fringe of shorter tentacles with slightly darker tips. That he had those made me wonder even more if what lay in his pants was she or not. I sat on the bed and stared until he was standing in front of me. He kept his face turned away, hands clasped behind his back, as if he didn't want to see or touch me. I reached out and touched one of those smooth, muscular tentacles. It jerked away at my touch. I stroked it, and I felt Sholto's gaze before I looked up to meet it. I stroked the outer skin of the tentacle again. These are for hard work, lifting, capturing prey or prisoners. I traced my finger on the underside of the tentacle, feeling the slightly different texture. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was thicker than human skin, almost rubbery, like the skin on a dolphin. "I suppose Batar told you that?" His voice was angry. "Yes." I grabbed the base of the tentacle where it melded into his body. I pulled gently but firmly down the length of it. It wrapped around my hand, holding it, moving it away from him. "Don't," he said. "It felt good, didn't it?" I asked. He looked at me, so angry, so scared. "How do you know what feels good to a night flyer?" I asked. He looked startled then, and I was able to pull my hand free of him. I touched one of the groupings of thinner tentacles. They retracted like sea fans when a diver brushes them below a coral sea. Batar could do the most intricate needlework with his fingers. I moved my hand lower, not quite touching the last visible line of tentacles. These are very sensitive. They can be used for the finest tactile work, but they're actually a secondary sexual organ. He looked startled. "We do not usually share that bit of information with outsiders." "I know." I smiled. Batar used to caress visiting ladies with them. They were often afraid to tell him to go away for fear of offending him and offending my father. I noticed when I finally went back to court that the host often caressed non-slua with the lower tentacles. It's a sort of in-joke that you all have on us. You touch us with what amounts to a breast, and we're none the wiser. "But you know," he said. "I like a good in-joke when I'm not the butt of it." I ran my hand in a long movement over that last line of organs. His breath went out in a sigh. His eyes stayed defiant, protective. I didn't even blame him for it. I had enough mixed genetics in my own ancestors that there, but for the grace of deity, go I. I touched them gently, and they began to weave around my fingers. The ends were slightly prehensile, not nearly as much so as the upper ones, but there was a slight depression on one side of each of the tentacles. I stroked a finger into one of the depressions. It made him shudder. I take it that has a specific job if you're with a female night flyer? He nodded wordlessly. What can they do for me? I asked the question for several reasons. First, I was curious. Second, I had to know if I could stand for him to touch me intimately with them. I was touching him in almost a detached, scientific way. You do X, and Y happens. Detachment might allow me to touch him, but it wouldn't get me through sex. He reached down with his hands, but that put the thicker tentacles in a mass against my face. It made me jerk back. Sholto instantly straightened. Maybe he would have stepped away again, but I grabbed a handful of the lower tentacles. It froze him in place, and his breath caught in his throat. The reaction reminded me of what happens when you touch a man's penis when he's not expecting it. He reached down with his hands and jerked my shirt out of my pants. The movement put the thick muscular limbs against my face. This time I didn't pull away, but it was an effort. He pulled the shirt over my head and let it drop to the floor. The defiance was tinged with something else, something darker and more real. He used two of the muscular tentacles to gently move my hands away from the lower organs. Then the thin, long tentacles grew, stretching longer and thinner, like muscular clay. The tips caressed the mounds of my breasts in quick teasing movements. It made me both startle and gasp. The tips plunged inside my bra, and it was like a snake crawling against my skin. I was about to tell him no, I couldn't do it, when those reddened tips found my nipples, and I discovered what the depressions on the underside were for. They had suction, and the touch was expert. My nipples hardened under the sucking, squeezing sensation. A second organ played low on my belly, tickling along the top of my pants. He asked without asking. I pushed him gently away. Enough, please. He pulled away from me, but this time he wasn't hurt. The look on his face was almost, not quite, but almost triumphant. The look on your face just now, that alone is worth much to me. I took a shaking breath and tried to think. Glad to hear it. But there's one more thing I have to check before I know for sure. He looked at me. Lose the belt, please, I said. I didn't have to ask twice. He took the belt out, but left the pants buttoned. I liked that he had done exactly what I asked, no more, no less. I undid the pants, exposing the line of his briefs. The bulge in them was straight and firm and looked very human. But after what I'd just seen, I had to be sure. I pulled the underwear carefully over that bulge and saw him nude for the first time. He was as straight and perfect as his face had promised, like a carved alabaster sculpture. I wrapped my hand around him and he cried out. I wasn't teasing. I was looking for something. Batar had had a spine inside his penis nearly as long as my hand, something no human woman would survive. Only the royals of their kind had it, and it meant they were fertile males. Without the spine, the females didn't ovulate during sex. Sholto watched me, eyes eager. A man's control is only so good. That's why my pants are staying on. He was like thick, muscled velvet in my hands, but there was nothing there but flesh, no nasty surprises. Your father wasn't royal? You're looking for the spine. His voice was low, hoarse. Yes. My father was not one of the royal drones, he whispered, those reasonable words in a voice that was growing less reasonable after every touch. Then how did you get to be king? My voice was calm. I hadn't stayed excited once the tentacle stopped touching me. It hadn't lasted, because I wasn't aroused by the sight of him. Lord and Lady forgive me, but I saw the extras as a deformity. King of the Slua is not an inherited title. It is earned. Earned, I said. How earned? He shook his head. I am having trouble thinking. I wonder why that is. I made it teasing, but I didn't mean it. I wished I did. I could have taken him a piece at a time, maybe if he'd had just 1 or 2 tentacles, but he had over a dozen. The thought of pressing my naked body against him, of being embraced by the nest of tentacles, the thought made me shudder. Sholto mistook my reaction, and one of the muscular tentacles brushed my hair like another man would use his hand. I closed my eyes, raised my face to the touch, tried to enjoy the caress, but I couldn't. For a night, maybe, but not night after night. I just couldn't. I lowered my face, and the tentacle moved away. I held him in my hand, as solid and lovely as any man I'd been with, and because of what lay writhing just above, I couldn't take the pleasure in it that I should have. Sholto was watching me expectantly, as if I'd already said yes. The logical thing would have been to stand up, kiss him, and bow out, but if I kissed him, the mass of tentacles would wrap around me, and Sholto would know how I truly felt. I didn't want him to see me pull away in horror. I wanted perhaps his last touch of she-flesh to be something pleasant, not humiliating. If I couldn't stand to go higher up his body, well, there was only one way to go, lower. I slid off the bed to my knees in front of him. The movement forced him to take a step back from the bed and put my face even with that length of solid, silken flesh. He drew breath to say something, but I stopped his words by taking him into my mouth. I ran my hands up the back of his thighs to cup his buttocks, digging my fingernails into his flesh. He cried out, his body thrusting a little to meet my mouth. Normally, I like to watch up the line of a man's body to see his reaction, but not this time. I didn't want to see. I fed at him, sucking him, using tongue, mouth, lips, and gently, teeth. His breathing took on that quick, panting rhythm that said I would have to stop soon or break the queen's taboo. The power, too, was back, like a solid hum of energy against my body, and where I touched him, the energy thrummed. Inside my mouth, it was as if he vibrated, and I had a sudden vision of what it might feel like to have this warm, power-filled thing between my legs. The image was so strong, I had to pull away. I opened my eyes and found his skin white, nearly translucent with power. I looked up slowly, and every inch of him was a shimmering, glowing thing. The ends of the smaller tentacles glowed like red embers, and the higher tentacles showed a play of marble color, like colored lightning under the skin. The play of soft red, softer violet, bands of gold like the color of his eyes pulsing against the white light of his skin was beautiful. I stared up at him, and in that moment, all I could see was beauty. He was as he was meant to be, a thing carved from light, filled with color and magic. That power rose off of him in a skin-caressing, body-vibrating roll, embracing me like some invisible, living silken blanket. I wanted to step into it, to feel it enfold me. "Undo your hair." My voice sounded strange, like someone else was speaking. Sholto undid the clasp of his hair and shook it out around his body. The hair fell past his knees in a glittering fall like new snow. I grabbed 2 handfuls of it and pulled gently. It had been so long since I'd had hair that could cascade over my body like this. It was like holding heavy, living satin. I pushed the cups of my bra down so that my breasts spilled out and I could brush his hair across them. That one touch made me shudder, and this time it was passion. I looked up at him, still on my knees. "Do you think we could behave ourselves if you ran all this lovely hair over my nude body?" Each color in his irises was glowing. The rings seemed almost to be whirling like the eye of a storm. The heat in his face changed to laughter. "Shall I lie and say yes?" I raised a hand gone shining, nearly translucent, to stroke along his body. "Yes, lie to me, if it will keep us from stopping." "Dangerous talk," he said softly. "Dangerous times," I said and licked him, making his body react from legs to shoulders, head going back, breath coming in a shuddering sigh. "Meredith," he said in that tone that a man saves for only the most intimate of occasions. The sound of it made my body tighten in places he hadn't seen, let alone touched. The door burst open with a crack of tearing wood and a roil of power that slammed into us like a giant hand. Sholto staggered but stayed on his feet. I ended on my butt on the floor, peering around his legs. I had an image of a dark figure moving in a blur, then Sholto was gone, over the bed and onto the floor beyond. Nuri's the gray stood framed in the doorway for a heartbeat. Then she was moving like a blur of mist toward me. I went for the bed and the gun under the pillow, and I knew I'd never make it in time. Chapter 14. I had to turn my back on the hag to have any chance of reaching the gun. I gave her my back. My hand was under the pillow, and claws slashed my bare back. I screamed, still reaching for the gun. Clawed hands wrapped around my arms and flung me to the floor. I hit the floor hard, unarmed. A nurse was on me before I could catch my breath. I kicked at her, and she slashed my legs through the slacks. I kept trying to kick at her and get to my feet, but she never gave me the chance. She attacked, slashing the air, my slacks, the flesh underneath, until I crawled to the wall, and there was nowhere else to run. She was shrieking at me. "It's ours! Ours! Ours!" Each word was punctuated with a slash. I had my arms in front of my body, but she was going to strip the flesh from my arms, and it wouldn't stop her. I'd expected the glow to be gone in a wash of terror and pain, but I was still a shining thing. Blood spilled out of my arms in a wash of glittering crimson, as if my very blood glowed. I felt power like a warm fist rising up inside my body, spreading out, but not like any magic I'd ever felt before. The power flared through me, and my body shone so brightly that the hag hesitated. Then she yelled, "I'll eat your skin off, girl, and you won't glow any more." She slashed my arms until I cried out, and I saw that black-taloned hand coming at my face, my eyes. I pushed my hand into her bony chest between her breasts, and power spilled up my arm, out my hand. I felt it smash into the hag. She stopped trying to slash me and just knelt frozen above me. The power flowing through me hurt. It felt like every fiber of my body was being burned all at once. I screamed and tried to stop it, but the pain grew until I looked at Nuris through vision gone gray and spotted. I was close to passing out from the pain, and if I did that, Nuris would kill me. My body felt like it was being pulled apart with red-hot knives. I finally found a voice to scream again, and Nuris joined me. She pulled away from me, crawling to lean against the side of the bed. She watched me with wide eyes, a look of disbelief on her twisted face. Her skin began to flow. It was the only word I had for it. Her skin began to flow like thick water, spilling over her hand like a glove. Nuris was screaming, "No! No!" Her body began to fold upon itself, the bones sliding out of place, the muscles sliding to the surface like logs rising in water. Blood spilled onto the carpet, then thicker, darker fluids burst in an acrid wash from her. I watched her heart move to the surface of her body and draw the rest of her internal organs with it like a string of fish. She screamed for a very long time, and even when she was reduced to a large round ball of flesh, you could still hear her screams, muffled, distant, but alive. Nuris was immortal. Being turned inside out didn't stop that. My pain was fading now, like an amputated limb that still hurt. I'd seen my father do similar things. It had been one of his hands of power, the one that earned him the title Prince of Flesh. I started crawling for the door, watching that pulsing, moving thing that I had made. When I cleared the end of the bed, I could see Black Agnes straddling Shoaltoe. She'd taken that shining piece of him inside the dull black of her body. He was struggling, but she held his arms down, pinning his body as she rode him. There are things among the Fae physically stronger than the Sidhe. The hags are one of them. I went for the splintered door and heard Agnes's voice chase me down the hall. "Nuris, kill that white bitch." The last thing I heard was a plaintive, "Nuris." I was in the elevators before the next round of screaming started. If Black Agnes had wanted me dead before, what I'd done to her sister wouldn't make her change her mind. It seemed to take a long time to ride down to the lobby. I was shaking, cold. I raised my arms in front of my face. Both arms were bloodied, hurting with that sharp pain that only slash cuts give, but my left arm was the worst. I could see bone in the cut on the side of my left forearm. Blood flowed from it to run in a steady red stream from my elbow to the elevator floor. My slacks were soaked nearly purple with blood. I was hurt enough for shock, but I didn't think that was it. It was the magic. I'd done what could only be a hand of power. I'd done something my father could have done. It was his most terrible power, one that even he used with regret, because they don't die. Nuris wouldn't die. She would be trapped in a prison of her own flesh and fluids forever, blind, unable to feed or breathe, but never dying, never dying. A scream built at the back of my throat, and I knew that if it came out that I would just keep screaming until Agnes found me and pulled out my eyes. I'd left my shirt, my jacket, and the gun in the room. I didn't even have anything to bind my wounds with. I did rearrange my bra so that my breasts were covered. The elevator doors opened, and a couple almost got in, then saw me. Shock, fear showed on their faces, and they let the doors slide shut. I'd forgotten my glamour. I couldn't go through the lobby looking like this. Personal glamour is my very best spell, yet I struggled as never before, to throw a veil of it over me. The best I could do was make people not see me as hurt and not notice I was wearing nothing above the waist but a bra. I couldn't seem to concentrate on changing my appearance. I needed to use glamour to hide myself from the slua, and I couldn't see myself in my head. I couldn't visualize it, and without that, I couldn't do glamour. The doors opened to the lobby and I walked out. No one screamed or pointed, so the glamour was working. I was all right. I was going to be all right. Then I saw Segna the Gold sitting on the plush oval couch in the center of the lobby. She watched me with narrowed yellow eyes. I turned on my heel and went for the back entrance and found Gethin of the Hawaiian shirt and the baseball cap a few yards away, in front of the other doors. I searched that bright, busy lobby, all the smiling people, the line for checking in and checking out, and knew that they could kill me here on this flowered carpet, and no one would know until my body hit the ground and my murderers had fled. The ladies' room was visible from where I stood. I didn't question it, just walked calmly to it. When the door shushed behind me, I turned and wrote the symbols for protection and strength on the door. I had enough blood coming out of my body that I could have written a letter. I pressed my hands to the door and I called power. I might have feared doing it so soon after what I'd accidentally done in the room, but I had no choice. I poured my power into that door, those runes, and I knew that no one of the blood would be able to pass. I knew it because I willed it so, and I was she, and I had warded the door with my own blood. No one uses blood. It's too powerful to waste on small things, not to mention unsanitary. But a little overkill wasn't a bad thing tonight. I needed time to think. I walked through the small lounge area with its sofa and line of mirrors to the real bathroom beyond. What I saw on the far wall made me realize I didn't need time to think. I was leaving. There was a window set high in the wall. All I had to do was get to it. I grabbed a handful of paper towels to shove against the worst of the arm wounds while I looked for something to stand on. Once outside, I was going to have to find medical help, but I had to survive first, or the only medical help I'd be getting was from the medical examiner. Gethin's voice, or I assumed it was him, as it wasn't the hag, said, little she, let me come in." I didn't give the next line. If he wanted to quote children's stories, he was welcome to it. I was getting out of here. I finally dragged one of the curved-back chairs from the lounge to the stall closest to the window. I had to jump to grab the metal top bar above the stall, which knocked the chair over. I hung there by my arms for a second, then started using my feet to climb up the wall and get the rest of my body close to my hands. The wounds that had been slowing down bled faster. I slipped twice in my own blood before I could perch on top of the stall and look at the small window. It was a very small window, and it was one of those moments when I was glad I was small. I balanced between the bathroom stall and the windowsill when something slammed into the window. I had a glimpse of tentacles and a razored mouth snapping at the glass as I fell to the floor. I had to climb back to the window, not to escape through it, but to ward it. They couldn't get in, but now I couldn't get out. I was trapped, losing more blood than my body could handle, and out of ideas. If I couldn't do anything else, I could at least try to slow the bleeding on my arms. I got a pile of paper towels and went to the sink. What I really needed was a cloth or strong thread to hold the towels in place. I was using the mirror to see how deep the wound on my left arm was when I noticed something in the mirror. Down in the depths of the reflection, something small and dark was moving. I turned, paper towels pressed to the wound, to search the room. The stalls were pale pink and plain, the walls pale pink. Even the few pipes that peeked out of the walls and ceiling had been painted pale pink to match. There was nothing dark in the room except my slacks and bra, and that wasn't what I was seeing. I turned back to the mirror, and it was still there. It was like a dark, shadowy figure walking down some crystal hall, coming closer, growing minutely larger. I didn't instantly think it was the she that had tried to kill me at Alistair Norton's, because a lot of she can do mirror magic. For all I knew, it was the sluagh coming through the mirror to spill over me. I couldn't ward the mirror. It wasn't a door or a window, not as I understood it. To come through the mirror meant they had better magic than I did, and I couldn't stop them. The door opened, and my heart almost stopped beating, but it was just two women. Two ordinary human women who couldn't have been the least bit sensitive, or they would never have been willing to come through the door. They came in laughing, gave me some strange looks, but went into adjoining stalls, still laughing and talking. They saw me dressed and not bleeding, because it was the image I'd projected. Good to know something was working. I didn't know what to do. Then I noticed something new in the mirror. There was a tiny spider crawling over it. No, not over it, inside it. The spider was inside the mirror, crawling on the other side of the glass. It was just like the spiders that had helped save me at Norton's house. It was the Fae who had saved me. He or she had saved me once. If I ever needed saving again, this was it. I tore off a piece of paper towel and wrote in blood, "Help me." I waited until the blood had dried a little, then I crumpled the paper into a hard, tight ball. The toilet flushed behind me. I was running out of time. I passed my fingertips just above the surface of the mirror, careful not to touch it. I didn't want to touch the mirror directly until I had a sense of exactly what spell it was. I could feel the trembling line of power where the magic pulled like a string against the solidness of it. The magic was like a weak spot, a metaphysical crack. Whether the practitioner had found a weakness in the mirror and exploited it, or made the weakness, I didn't know. I pressed my fingers against the cool glass and thought of the heat that had forged the mirror. I spread my fingers apart and the glass fell to pieces like cotton candy on a summer day. A hole opened in the mirror, and a line of white, dazzling light spilled out of it like a distant flash of diamonds. I threw the ball of paper into that melted hole. I smoothed the mirror back into place like molding clay. I spread it even with my bare hand. The door opened behind me. I was out of time. There was a lump in the glass, not perfect. I leaned into the mirror, pretending to check my non-existent lipstick, blocking the view. The first woman had opened a tiny purse and was really fixing her lipstick. But I wasn't looking at my lips. I was watching that shadowy figure low in the mirror. I could see tiny shadow arms moving, unwrapping my message. I heard a male voice ring like a bell in the room. "Done." The woman froze in front of the mirror. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "What?" I asked. "Julie, did you hear that?" The other woman still in the stall said, "Hear what?" The toilet flushed and Julie joined her friend at the sink. To my horror, the shadowy figure started growing larger. He was going to come out of the mirror. He was going to walk out of the freaking mirror. I didn't have enough glamour left in me to cover this. Damn it! I tried to think of some way to distract the women when I realized exactly what to do. I crossed the room to the light switch and flipped it off. As the darkness slammed around us like a black wall, I felt the pressure in the room change. I knew someone was crawling through the mirror, as if pulling aside a thick crystalline curtain. I swallowed to clear my ears and wondered what to do with the two yelling women. Chapter 15. I stood in the dark, feeling something moving in the dark, and knew it wasn't the women, and it wasn't me. One woman said, "What the hell is going on?" "Lights are out in the ladies' room," I said. "Brilliant," the other woman said. "Let's get out of here, Julie." I heard the two of them stumbling toward the door in the dark. They slid out into the hallway, a flash of brightness against the pitch black before the door closed behind them. A wavering yellow-green flame sprang to life in the dark. The flames cast flickering shadows on a dark, dark face. Doyle's skin wasn't brown. It was black. He looked as if he'd been carved from ebony. His cheekbones were high and sculpted, the chin a little too sharp for my taste. He was all angles and darkness. Those angles looked deceptively delicate, like the bones of a bird, but I'd seen him be hit full in the face with a warhammer once. He'd bled, but he hadn't broken. The moment I saw him, fear rushed through me in a wave of coldness that left my fingertips tingling. If he hadn't saved my life once already, I'd have been sure he meant my death now. He was the Queen's right hand. She would say, "Where is my darkness? Bring me my darkness." And someone would die or bleed or both. It was Doyle that should have been given the task of my death, not Sholto. Had he saved me earlier, to kill me now? "I mean you no harm, Princess Meredith." The moment he said it out loud, I could breathe again. Doyle didn't play word games. He said what he meant what he said. The problem was that most of the time he said things like, "I've come to kill you." But this time, he meant me no harm. Why? Or rather, why not? I was standing trapped in a ladies' room with wards that would not hold on the door and window. Eventually the sluagh would break through, and I didn't trust Sholto to save me from them. If it had been almost anyone but Doyle, I'd have fallen into his arms with relief, or just let myself faint from blood loss and shock. But it was Doyle, and he simply wasn't a person that you fell into the arms of, not without checking for knives first. "What do you want, Doyle?" The words came out harsher than I meant them to be, angry, but I didn't take them back or apologize for the tone. I was fighting not to shiver visibly, and failing. I was still bleeding from a half-dozen wounds on my arms, blood sliding inside my slacks like a warm worm working against my skin. I needed help, and I couldn't hide that fact from him. It put me in a very weak bargaining position. When dealing with the Queen, that was a bad place to be. And make no mistake about it, when dealing with Doyle, you were dealing with the Queen, unless things had changed drastically in the court in 3 short years. "To obey my Queen in all things." His voice was like his skin, dark. It made me think of molasses and other thick, sweet things. A voice so deep it could hit notes low enough to make my spine shiver. "That's not an answer," I said. His hair looked very short and clipped close to his head, black but not as black as his skin. But I knew the hair wasn't short. It was long. His hair was always in a tight, thick braid down his back. I couldn't see it, but I knew the braid reached to his ankles. The braid left the tips of his pointed ears bare and visible. The green flame glittered off the earrings in those fantastic ears. 2 fine diamond studs graced each dark earlobe, and 2 dark jewels almost the color of his skin sat beside the diamonds like dark stars. Small silver hoops climbed up the cartilage of both ears to the very top, where the ear curled into a soft, fleshy point. The ears showed that he was not full high court, but a bastard mix like myself. Only the ears betrayed him, and he could have hidden them behind his hair, but he almost never did. I glanced down at the small silver necklace that was the only other jewelry he wore. A small silver spider with its fat body in the shape of some dark jewel sat on the black cloth of his chest. "I should have remembered that your livery is a spider." He gave a very small smile, which for Doyle was an outrageous amount of expression. "Normally I would give you time to adjust to my presence, our predicament, but your wards will not hold forever. We must act if you are to be saved." "Lord Sholto was sent here by the Queen to kill me. Why send you to save me? Even for her that makes no sense." "The Queen did not send Sholto." I stared up at him. Did I dare believe him? We rarely lied outright to each other, but someone was lying to me because they couldn't both be telling the truth. Sholto said I was under the Queen's order of execution. "Think, Princess, if Queen Andaeus truly desired your execution, she'd drag you home so that the court could see what happens to she who flee the court against royal orders. She would make an example of you." He motioned at the room, his hands spreading flame as he moved, like after-images. "She would not have killed you in hiding, where no one would see." The flame collected back upon itself like water droplets sliding over a plate, but stayed dancing above his fingertips. I put a hand on the edge of the sink. If this conversation didn't end soon, I was going to be on my knees, because standing wasn't going to be an option. How much blood had I lost? How much blood was I still losing? "You mean that the Queen would want to see me die?" I said. "Yes," he said. Something thudded into the window with enough force that the room seemed to shake. Doyle whirled toward the sound, drawing a long knife, or a small sword, from behind his back. The greenish flames hung floating in the air above one of his shoulders like an obedient pet. The light played on the blade and the carved bone hilt. The hilt was a trio of crows, their breasts meeting, their wings entwined, their beaks open bearing jewels for the pommel. I sank to the floor, one hand on the sink. That's mortal dread. It was one of the Queen's private weapons. I'd never heard of her loaning it to anyone for any reason. Doyle turned slowly from the empty window. The short sword caught the wavering light. "Now do you believe that the Queen sent me to save you?" "Either that, or you killed her for the sword," I said. He looked down at me, and the look on his face said he didn't see the humor in that last remark. Good, because I wasn't being funny. Mortal dread was one of the treasures of the Unseelie court. The sword had mortal blood tied to its forging, which meant that a death wound from mortal dread was truly a death wound for any fae, even a she. I would have said that the only way to get the sword was to pry it from my aunt's cold, dead hands. Something large was hitting the window over and over again. I'd hoped they'd tried to break the wardings by magic, which would take some time, but they were going to simply destroy what I'd warded. If the window was no longer there, then the ward would no longer work. Brute force over magic. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Tonight, it was going to work. There was a sharp, crumbling sound as the glass cracked around the wire that ran through it. Without the wire in the glass, it would have broken already. Doyle knelt by me, sword pointed tip down like you hold a loaded gun for safety. "We are out of time, Princess." I nodded. "I'm listening." He reached his empty right hand toward me, and I flinched, falling back on my butt on the floor. "I must touch you, Princess." "Why?" The glass cracked enough that wind oozed through the room. I could hear something large rubbing against the wall, and the high twittering calls of the night flyers urging their beefy brethren on. "I can kill some of them, my princess, but not all of them. I will lay my life down for you, but it will not be enough, not against the might of nearly the entire Sluagh." He leaned in close enough that I had to either let him touch me or lie on the floor and start crawling crab-wise backward away from him. I laid my hand against him, touching the leather of his jacket. He continued pushing forward, and my hand slid off to the black T-shirt underneath. I felt something wet. I jerked back, and my hand was covered black in the eerie half-light. "You're bleeding," I said. "The Sluagh were most persistent that I did not find you tonight." I had to put one hand behind me to keep from falling to the ground, because he was that close enough to kiss, or to kill. "What do you want, Doyle?" The glass behind us shattered, spraying the floor in a tinkling shower of shards like a sharp, hard rain. "My apologies, but there is no time for niceties." He let the sword fall to the floor and grabbed my upper arms. He pulled me against him, and I had a second to realize that he meant to kiss me. If he'd tried to knife me, I'd have been prepared, or at least not surprised, but a kiss? I was lost. His skin smelled like some exotic spice. His lips were soft and the kiss gentle. I was frozen in his arms, too shocked to know what to do, as if he'd bespelled me. He whispered against my lips, "She said it must be given to you as it was given to me." There was a threat of anger in his whispered words. I heard something fall through the window, a heavy plop. Doyle released me so suddenly that I fell back to the floor. In one fluid movement he picked up the sword, turned, and moved across the floor in a dance-like movement that never left his knees. He drove the sword into a black tentacle as big as he was that had spilled through the crack in the window. Something screamed on the other side of the broken glass. He pulled the sword from the tentacle, and it began to retract through the window. Doyle stood, moving just ahead of its motion. He raised the sword above his head and brought it down with a force that made the blade a shining blur. The tentacle fell in pieces in a wash of blood that spilled like black water in the greenish-yellow light. The rest of the tentacle retracted through the window to a sound like the wind howling. Doyle turned back to me. "That will make them hesitate, but not for long." He strode toward me, bloody sword naked in his hand. It had all happened in seconds. He'd even managed to stand to one side so the blood had missed him, as if he'd known where to stand or what the blood would do. Watching him move toward me, I couldn't stay on the ground. He was here to keep me alive, but as he moved closer, every instinct I had screamed out. He was an elemental thing carved of darkness and half-light, armed with a killing sword and moving toward me like death incarnate. In that one moment, I knew why humans had fallen down and worshipped us. I used the sinks to pull myself to my feet, because I could not meet him crouched like a hunted thing. I had to stand before that dark grace, or bow down before it like a human worshipper. Standing made the room waver in lines of color and darkness. I was so light-headed I was afraid I'd fall, but I kept my feet with a death grip on the sinks. When my vision cleared, I was still upright, and Doyle was close enough that I could see green flames reflected in the dark mirrors of his eyes. He was suddenly holding me so close that the blood on his shirt slapped cool against my skin. His hands were so strong as they moved up my back, pressing me against his body. "The Queen put her mark within me to give to you. Once you have it, all will know that to harm you is to risk the Queen's mercy." "The kiss," I said. He nodded. "She said, I must give it to you as she gave it to me. Forgive me." He kissed me before I could ask what he was seeking forgiveness for. He kissed me like he was trying to climb inside me through my mouth. I wasn't ready for it, and hadn't given permission for it. I tried to pull away, and his arm locked against my back, pressing the leather into my skin. His other hand held my face, fingers digging into my chin. I couldn't pull away from the kiss. I couldn't pull away from him. Struggling was getting me nowhere, so I stopped and opened my mouth to him, kissing him back. A tension went out of his body, as if he thought I'd given permission. I hadn't. I grabbed his black t-shirt and began to pull it out of his pants. It was so wet with blood that it clung to his skin, but I pulled it free. I ran my hands over the flatness of his stomach, up to the smooth swell of his chest. He melted against me, the hand on my back kneading against my bare skin. The hands found the wound high up on his chest. It was wide, a deep slash. 3 things happened at once. I plunged my fingers into his wound. His body stiffened and I felt him react to the pain. I think he would have released me then, but the 3rd thing happened on the heels of his pain. With my fingers plunged inside the meat of his body, the Queen's mark filled his mouth and slid inside mine. A sweet rush of power filled my mouth, pouring from Doyle's body into mine and melting warm between our lips, as if we were both sucking on the same piece of candy. The power swelled inside us, melting between us in long, sweet strands. It filled us to the brim with warmth, like mulled wine poured into twin cups, until power ran down our bodies, through our bodies, to finally pour in liquid warmth across our skin. Doyle broke the kiss, pulling away from me. I slid to the floor, not from blood loss this time, but because my knees wouldn't hold me. I couldn't seem to focus on anything, as if I were looking at the world through a haze. Doyle was leaning both hands on the sinks, head down, as if he was lightheaded too. I heard him say, "Consort, save me." I don't know what my snappy comeback would have been, because the door burst open, slamming into the far stalls. Sholto was silhouetted in the doorway. He'd thrown the gray overcoat across his bare chest, but the nest of tentacles showed like some monster trying to pull itself from his skin. I had a sense of movement behind me, and turned to see Doyle go for the sword that he'd laid in the sink. I felt Sholto's power rise like a wind in the lighted doorway. I realized suddenly that they both thought the other had come to kill me. I had time to yell no. Doyle's flame vanished, swallowed into a darkness that was velvet and perfect and filled with the sounds of moving bodies. Chapter 16. I screamed, "Don't! Sholto! Doyle! Don't hurt each other!" I heard flesh hitting flesh, the sliding footsteps as someone glided through the dark. Someone drew a hard breath, then small noises. "Damn it! Listen to me! Neither of you is here to harm me. You both want me alive." I don't know if they didn't hear me or didn't care. There was at least one sword being used in the dark, so I didn't get up and walk toward the light switch. I crawled. I kept the weight of the sinks to my right and searched the darkness just ahead with my left hand. The fight continued in almost utter silence. I could hear them straining against each other. Someone cried out, and I said a silent prayer that no one was dead. I almost crawled into the wall, touching it at the last second. I worked my way up until I found the light switch. I hit the lights, and the room was suddenly blindingly bright. I was left blinking in the brilliance. The two she were locked together, bodies straining against one another. Doyle was on his knees, a tentacle wrapped around his neck. Sholto was covered in blood, and it took my eyes a second to realize that one of his stomach tentacles had been severed and lay twitching next to Doyle's knee. Doyle still held the sword, but Sholto's hand and two tentacles held it away from the other she. Their other hands were locked against each other, as if they were engaged in a game of finger wrestling. Except this was no game. I was actually surprised that Sholto seemed to be holding his own. Doyle was the acknowledged champion of the Unseelie court. There were very few who could stand against him, and almost none who could win. Sholto wasn't on that short list, or so I thought. Then I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a small glow. When I looked straight at it, nothing was there. Magic is like that sometimes, only visible through peripheral vision. There was something glowing on Sholto's hand, a ring. As I watched, the sword slipped from Doyle's grip and he started to go limp in Sholto's grasp. Sholto grabbed the sword in his hand before it could hit the ground. The tentacle stayed around Doyle's arm. I was moving forward before I had time to think of what I'd do when I got there. Sholto held Doyle's limp body in his tentacles and raised the sword in a two-handed overhead plunge, like you'd use to drive a knife into someone's chest. I was behind Doyle as the sword started down. I curled my body over his, one hand upraised, my gaze never leaving that glittering blade. I had a heartbeat to wonder if Sholto would stop in time. Then he reversed the sword and held it pointed at the ceiling. "What are you doing, Meredith?" "He's here to save me, not kill me." "He is the Queen's darkness. If she desires your death, he will be her instrument." "But he has mortal dread, one of her personal weapons. He carried her mark in his body to give to me. If you'll calm down long enough to look with more than just your eyes, you'll see it." Sholto blinked at me, then frowned. "Then why would she send me to kill you? Even for Andeus, that makes no sense. If you'll stop strangling him, maybe we can figure it out." He looked down at Doyle's limp body, still hanging from the tentacles, and said, "Oh," as if he'd forgotten he was still squeezing the life from the other man. Technically, you couldn't strangle a she to death, but I'd never been comfortable testing the limits of immortality. You never knew when you'd find a chink in the armor big enough to die through. Sholto uncurled his limbs from Doyle, and the other man fell into my arms, his weight driving me to my knees. I wasn't losing enough blood for this much weakness. It was either shock or something to do with using a hand of power for the first time. Whatever was causing it, I wanted to close my eyes and rest, and that just wasn't going to be happening. I sat on the floor, cradling Doyle's head in my lap. The pulse in his neck was strong, steady, but he did not wake. He took 2 quick breaths, then his head drew back, eyes wide, and he took a great gasp of air. He sat up coughing. I saw him tense, and Sholto must have too, because the sword was suddenly pointed at Doyle's face. Doyle froze, staring up at the other man. "Finish it." "No one is finishing anything," I said. Neither man looked at me. I couldn't see Doyle's expression, but I could see Sholto's, and I did not like what I saw. Anger, satisfaction. He wanted to kill Doyle. It was there on his face, plain to see. "Doyle saved me, Sholto. He saved me from your sluha." "If you had not warded the door, I would have been here in time," Sholto said. "If I had not warded the door, you would have been in time to mourn over my dead body, but not in time to save me." Sholto still wouldn't take his gaze from Doyle. "How did he get inside when I could not?" "I am she," Doyle said. "So am I," Sholto said. The anger in his face hardened just a bit. I slapped Doyle's shoulder hard enough to sting. He didn't turn, but he winced. "Don't bait him, Doyle." "I was not baiting, merely stating a fact." This entire fight was beginning to feel very personal, as if there was business between the two of them that had nothing to do with me. Look, I don't know what you have against each other, but call me selfish, I don't care. I want out of this damn bathroom alive, and that takes priority over whatever personal vendetta the two of you have. So stop acting like little boys and start behaving like members of the royal bodyguards. Get me out of here in one piece."
"She's right,"
Doyle said softly.
"The great darkness, bowing out of a fight. Inconceivable. Or is it that I'm the one with the sword now?"
Sholto moved the sword a fraction forward, touching the tip to the indentation in Doyle's upper lip.
"A sword that can kill any fae, even a she-nobleman. Oh, I forget. You're not afraid of anything."
There was a bitterness, a mockery to Sholto's voice that said without doubt that I'd stepped into an old grudge.
"I fear many things," Doyle said, his voice calm, neutral. "Death is not one of them. But the ring on your finger is something that I am wary of. How did you get Beahawik? I have not seen it used in centuries."
Sholto raised his hand so the dark bronze of the ring glimmered dully in the lights. It was a heavy piece of jewelry, and I would have noticed it on his hand if it had been there earlier.
"It was the Queen's gift to show her blessing on this hunt." "The Queen did not give you Beahawik, not personally."
Doyle sounded very sure of that. "What is Beahawik?" I asked.
"Vitality," Doyle said. "It steals the very life and skill of your opponent, which is the only way that he bested me in a fight."
Sholto flushed. It was considered a sign of weakness to need more magic than you had in your own body to defeat another she. Basically, Doyle had said that Sholto couldn't win a fair fight, and he had had to cheat. But it wasn't cheating, just less than chivalrous. Fuck chivalry, come back alive. It was what I told any man I'd ever loved, including my father, before every duel.
"The ring proves that I have the Queen's favor,"
Sholto said, his face still colored by his anger.
"The ring did not come from the Queen's own hand to yours," Doyle said, "any more than your order to kill the princess came from her mouth."
"I know who speaks for the Queen and who does not," Sholto said, and it was his turn to sound certain.
"Really?" Doyle said. "And if I had come to you and given you the Queen's orders, would you have believed me?"
Sholto frowned, but nodded.
"You are the Queen's darkness. When your mouth moves, her words come out of it. Then hear these words. The Queen wants Princess Meredith alive and back home."
I couldn't read all the thoughts moving across Sholto's face, but there were a lot of them. I tried to ask the question he would not answer for Doyle. "Did the Queen herself tell you to come to Los Angeles and kill me?" Sholto looked at me. It was a long, considering look, but finally he shook his head.
"No," he said. "Who told you to come to Los Angeles and slay the princess?" Doyle asked.
Sholto opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. The tension flowed out of him, and he stepped back from Doyle, lowering the sword to his side.
"No, I will keep the name of the traitor to myself for now."
"Why?" I asked.
"Because Doyle's presence here can mean only one thing. The Queen wants you to return to court."
He looked at Doyle.
"I'm right, aren't I?" "Yes," Doyle said.
"She wants me to return to court?" Doyle moved so he could see both Sholto and me, his back to the empty bathroom stalls.
"Yes, Princess."
I shook my head. "I left because people were trying to kill me, Doyle. The Queen wasn't stopping them."
"They were legal duels," he said.
"They were court-sanctioned assassination attempts," I said.
"I did mention this to her," Doyle said.
"And she said what?"
"She gave me her mark to give to you. If anyone kills you now, even in a duel, they will have to face our Queen's vengeance. Trust in this, Princess. Even those who desire your death greatly will not want to pay that high a price for it."
I looked up at Sholto. The movement made me slightly dizzy. Shock, definitely shock. "Fine. I'm going back to court if the Queen can guarantee my safety. What does that have to do with you not giving us the name of the traitor? Who used the Queen's name to send you to execute me when she didn't want me dead?"
I will keep that information to myself for now, Sholto said again. His face was that arrogant mask that he wore so often at court. Why? I asked. Because if the Queen allows you back to court, you don't need to bargain with me. You will be able to return to Fairy, to the Unseelie Court, and I would bet my kingdom that she'll find you another she-lover. So you see, Meredith, you don't need me. You'll have everything I could have offered you, and you won't be tied for a lifetime to a deformed monster. You're not deformed, Sholto. If your hags hadn't interrupted, I'd have proved that to you. Something flickered over his face, rippling on the surface of his arrogance. Yes, my hags. He turned those tricolor eyes on me. I thought you had no hand of power, Meredith. I don't, I said. I think Nerys would argue with you on that. I didn't know, Sholto. I didn't mean to... I had no words for what I'd done to Nerys. What has happened? Doyle asked. Black Agnes lied to the Slua. She told them that if I mated with Meredith, that I would become pure she and no longer be their king. She convinced them that they were protecting me from myself, protecting me from the wiles of the she-witch. I raised eyebrows at that. He looked at me. But I have persuaded Agnes and the rest that you are not a danger to them. I met his eyes. I saw the method of persuasion before I ran. He nodded. Agnes said to thank you. She's never had better from me. She thinks it has something to do with your magic. She's not angry about Nerys? I asked. She wants you dead, yes, but she's afraid of you now, Meredith. The hand of flesh like your father. Who would have dreamed it? There was something in his eyes besides careful arrogance. I realized with a start that it was fear. Fear peeking through his mask. It wasn't just Black Agnes who was afraid of what I'd done up in that room. Hand of flesh, Doyle repeated. What are you saying, Sholto? Sholto held the sword out to Doyle, hilt first. Take this, and come up to my room and see what our little princess has done. Nerys cannot be healed, so I request that you grant her true death before you escort Meredith home. I will see you both safely to a taxi on the off chance that my Slua are not perfectly obedient. His words, his body language all said that he was not happy with Doyle. With a small bow of his head, Doyle took the sword. If it is a favor you need, then I am happy to oblige for the name of the traitor that sent you to Los Angeles falsely in the Queen's name. Sholto shook his head. I will not give up the name, not now. I will hold it until it is of use to me, or until I decide to deal with the traitor personally. If you told us the traitor's name, it would help us keep the princess safe at court. Sholto laughed then, that strange, bitter sound that passed for normal laughter for him. I will not say who sent me here, but I can guess who wanted the message given, and so can you. Meredith fled the court because Prince Kel's supporters kept challenging her to duels. If it had been anyone else behind the attempts on Meredith's life, the Queen would have stepped in and stopped it. Such an insult to the royal family would not have been allowed, not even to a mixed-breed magicless mortal. But it was her precious baby boy who was behind it, and we all knew it. So Meredith fled and hid herself away, because she didn't trust the Queen to keep her alive when Kel wanted her dead. Doyle met those accusing eyes with a tranquil face. I think you will find that our Queen is no longer so tolerant of the prince's eccentricities. Sholto laughed again, and it was a painful sound. When I left the court only days ago, I'd say she was still very tolerant of Kel's eccentricities. Doyle's face was still peaceful, as if nothing the other man could do would upset him. I think that bothered Sholto more than any other reaction that Doyle could have given him. I think Doyle knew that. One problem at a time, Sholto. For now I have the Queen's promise and her magic to ensure that the princess will not be harmed at court. As you wish to believe, Doyle, but for now I would ask you to aid me in bringing death to one that I valued. Doyle stood easily, as if he hadn't been nearly strangled to death moments ago,
I wasn't even sure I could stand. There is more than just immortality that I miss by taking after my human blood. They both reached out to me at the same time, and I took both hands. They nearly pulled me off my feet. Easy does it, boys. I just need help standing, not flying. Doyle looked at me. You are pale. How badly are you hurt? I shook my head and pulled away from them both. Not that badly. It's mostly shock, and it hurt when I did what I did to Nuris. What did you do? Doyle asked. Come see, Sholto said. It is worth a look or three. He looked at me then. The news of what you have done will ride before you to the court Meredith. Meredith, princess of flesh, no longer merely Essis's daughter. It is very rare for a child to receive the same gifts as the parent, Doyle said. Sholto walked toward the door, tying the gray trench coat in place as he moved. Blood soaked into the cloth where the cut tentacle pressed against it. Come, Doyle, bearer of the painful flame, Baron Sweet Tongue, come and see what you think of Meredith's gifts. I was familiar with the first title, but not the second. I asked, Baron Sweet Tongue? I've never heard you called that. It is a very old nickname, he said. Come, Doyle, you are too modest. It was the Queen's pet name for him once. The two men looked at each other, and again there was a weight of old grudge in the air. The name is not for what you assume, Sholto, Doyle said. I assume nothing, but I think the sobriquet speaks for itself. Don't you, Meredith? Baron Sweet Tongue does have a certain ambience, I said. It is not for what you think, Doyle repeated. Well, Sholto said, it is certainly not because of your honeyed words. That was true. Doyle didn't go in for long speeches, and he was not an accomplished flatterer. If you say it's not sexual, then I believe you, I said. Doyle made a small bow to me. Thank you. The Queen doesn't give out pet names except for sex, Sholto said. Yes, she does, I said. When and for what? When she thinks the nickname will bother the person bearing it, and because she enjoys being irritating. Well, the last is certainly true, Sholto said. He had his hand on the door handle. I'm surprised no one barged in on us, I said. I put a small spell of aversion on the door. No mortal would want to pass it, and few fey. He started to open the door. Don't you want your limb? They might be able to reattach it. It will grow back, he said. I must have looked as disbelieving as I felt, because he smiled in a half-superior, half-apologetic way. There are some benefits to being half-night flyer. Not many, but a few. I can regenerate any lost body part. He seemed to think about that for a second, then added, so far anyway. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't try. I think the princess needs to get some rest, so if we could see your friend, Doyle said. Of course. Sholto held the door for us. What about the mess? I asked. We're just going to leave bits of tentacle and blood all over the floor? The Baron made the mess. Let him clean it up, Sholto said. Neither the body parts nor the blood belong to me, Doyle said. If you want it cleaned up, I suggest you do it yourself. Who knows what damage a talented witch could do with a body part left lying around. Sholto protested, but in the end, he slipped the severed tentacle in his coat pocket. They left the body-sized one where it lay. If I were Sholto, I would definitely be over-tipping the cleaning staff, just to make up for whoever had to do the bathroom. We rode back up in the elevator, and Doyle knelt on the floor studying what was left of Nuris the Grey. She was a bowl of flesh about the size of a bushel basket. Nerves, tendons, muscles, internal organs all glistened wetly on the outside of that bowl. They all seemed to be functioning normally. That lump of flesh even rose and fell with breath. The sound was the worst. A high, thin screaming, muffled because her mouth was now on the inside of her body. But still she screamed. She shrieked. The shivering that had been growing less grew more. I was suddenly cold standing there in my bra and pants. I got my shirt from the floor where I'd left it and slipped it on, but knew that mere cloth wasn't going to take care of this particular kind of cold. It was more a shivering of the soul than the body. I could pile myself with blankets and it wouldn't help. Doyle looked up at me, kneeling beside that pushing, screaming ball.
Most impressive. Prince Esses himself could not have done better.
The words were a compliment, but his face was so empty I couldn't tell if he was pleased or not. I actually thought it was one of the most horrible things I'd ever seen, but I knew better than to share the observation. It was a powerful weapon, the hand of flesh. If people believed I'd use it easily, often, it was more of a deterrent. If they thought I feared it, then the threat would be less. I don't know, Doyle. I saw my father turn a giant inside out once. Do you think I could do something that large? My voice was dry, interested, but in an academic sort of way. It was the voice I'd cultivated at court, the voice I used when I was trying not to have hysterics or run screaming from a room. I had learned to watch the most awful things and make dry, urbane comments. Doyle took the question at face value.
I don't know, Princess, but it will be interesting to discover the limits of your power.
I disagreed, but I let the comment stand because I couldn't think of anything dry and urbane enough to cover the situation. The muffled shrieks continued as fast as the ball of flesh could draw breath. Nerys was immortal. My father had once done this to an enemy of the Queen's, and Deus kept that ball of flesh in a trunk in her room. Periodically, you'd find it sitting around her bedchamber. To my knowledge, no one ever questioned what it was doing out of its trunk. You just picked it up, put it back, locked it away, and fought down any visuals that came to mind when you found it sitting in the Queen's bed. Sholto asked that you grant Nerys death. Do it so we can get out of here. I sounded disinterested, even bored. I thought if I had to stand there and hear that thing screaming for much longer, I'd join it. Still on his knees, Doyle held the sword up to me, hilt first, the blade lying on his hands.
It is your magic. Let it be your kill.
I stared at the bone hilt, the three ravens and their jeweled eyes. I didn't want to do it. I stared at the blade for a minute more, trying to think how to get out of this without appearing weak. Nothing came to mind. If I got squeamish now, then Nerys' torment was for nothing. I would have gained a new title, but not the reputation that went with it. I took the sword, and hated Doyle for offering it to me. It should have been easily done. Her heart was trapped and pulsing on the side of the ball. I thrust the blade into it. Blood poured black, and the heart stopped beating. But that thin screaming didn't stop. I glanced at the two men. Why isn't she dead?
The Slua are harder to kill than the She, Sholto said.
How much harder? He shrugged.
It's your kill.
In that instant, I hated them both, because I realized finally that it was a test. It might be that if I refused the kill, they'd leave her alive. That was not acceptable. I couldn't leave her like this, knowing that she'd never age or heal or die. She'd just continue. Death was mercy. Anything else was madness, hers and mine. I stabbed the sword into every vital organ I could find. They bled, shriveled, ceased to function, and still the screaming went on. I finally raised the sword in a two-handed motion above my head and just started stabbing. At first, I paused between stabs or slices, but every time the screams just went on and on, trapped inside that ball of meat. Somewhere around the 10th blow or the 15th blow, I stopped pausing, stopped listening, and just kept stabbing. I had to make the screaming stop. I had to make her die. The world narrowed down to the pounding of the blade into the thick meat. My arms raised and lowered, raised and lowered. The blade bit into the flesh. Blood sprayed across my face, my shirt. I ended on my knees beside something that was no longer round, no longer whole. I'd hacked the thing into pieces, unrecognizable pieces. The screaming had stopped. My hands were soaked with blood, crimson to the elbows. The sword blade was scarlet. The bone hilt was solid blood, and still the hilt fit my hand well, not slippery at all. The green silk shirt I'd put back on was black with soaked blood. My slacks had gone from purple to a violet black. Someone was breathing too fast, too ragged, and I realized it was me. Sometime during the butchering there had been a fierce satisfaction, almost a joyfulness in the sheer destruction. Now I stared down at what I had done and felt nothing. There wasn't enough of me left to feel anything about this, so I felt nothing. I was numb, and it wasn't a bad way to be. I got to my feet using the edge of the bed. The bed was already spattered with blood. What was one more handprint? My arms were sore, the muscles shaking from too much exercise. I offered the sword to Doyle as he'd offered it to me. Good sword. The hilt never got slippery. My voice sounded as empty of emotion as I felt. I wondered if this was what it was like to be crazy. If it was, it wasn't so very bad. Doyle took the sword and dropped to his knees, head bowed. Sholto echoed him, kneeling, bowing his head. Doyle saluted me with the bloody sword and said, "Meredith, Princess of Flesh, true royal of the blood, welcome to the inner circle of the She." I stared down at both of them, still echoingly numb. If there were ritual words to answer with, I couldn't think of them. Either I'd never known them, or I just couldn't make my mind work right now. The only thing I could think to say was, "May I use your shower?" "Be my guest," Sholto said. The carpet squished under my feet, and when I walked off that section of carpet, I left bloody footprints behind me. I stripped and showered in the hottest water I could stand against my skin. The blood wasn't red by the time it ran down the drain. It was pink. It was while I watched that pinkish water swirl down the drain that I realized two things. First, I was glad I'd had the courage to finish Nuris rather than leave her in that horror. Second, part of me had enjoyed killing her. I'd have liked to think that the part that enjoyed the kill was motivated by the mercy of the first thought, but I couldn't afford to be that generous to myself. I had to wonder if the part of me that enjoyed sinking blade into flesh was the same part that made Andeas keep her own bit of flesh in a locked trunk in her room. The second you stop questioning yourself is the second that you become the monster. Chapter 17. I arrived back at my apartment with my hair still damp from the hotel shower. Doyle insisted on unlocking the door for me, in case it had been magically booby-trapped. He was taking his job of bodyguard seriously, but from Doyle I wouldn't have expected less. When he pronounced it safe, I walked onto the gray carpet barefoot. I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt and a pair of loose men's shorts, clothes Sholto had borrowed from Gethin. The only thing I couldn't borrow from the man was shoes. My clothes were still in the hotel room, so blood-soaked that even the underwear had been unusable. Some of the blood had been Nuris's, some of it mine. I turned on the light switch by the door. The overhead light blazed to life. I'd paid extra to be able to paint the apartment a color other than white. The walls of the front room were pale pink. The couch was mauve, purple and pink. The overstuffed chair in the corner was pink. The drapes were pink with ties of purple. Jeremy had said it was like being inside an expensively decorated Easter egg. The bookcase was white. The entertainment center was white. I turned on the standing lamp by the overstuffed chair. The light over the small white kitchen table and chairs was next. Lacy white curtains framed the big window in front of the table. The window glass was very black and somehow threatening. I closed the drapes, shutting the night out behind the white blind. I stood for a moment in front of the only painting in the front room. It was a print of The Butterfly's Haunt by W. Scott Miles. The picture was mostly green, and the butterflies were painted to nature, so there was precious little pink or purple in the picture. But you never chose a painting just because it matches a room. You choose a painting because it speaks to you, because it says something that you want to be reminded of daily. The picture had always seemed peaceful, idyllic. But tonight, it was just paint on canvas. Tonight, nothing was going to please me. I turned on the kitchen lights and went for the bedroom. Doyle had stood quietly to one side as I moved around the room, turning on all the lights, like a child waking from a nightmare. Light to chase away the bad things. The trouble was that the bad things were in my head now. There was no light bright enough for that. He followed me as I went into the bedroom. I hid the overhead light as I moved through the door.
I like what you've done with the bedroom," he said.
The comment made me turn and look at him. "What do you mean?" His face stayed impassive, unreadable.
"The living room was so very pink. I feared the bedroom would be as well."
I looked around the room at the soft gray walls, the burgundy wallpaper border with its mauve, pink, and white flowers. The bed was a king-sized four-poster, leaving almost no room between the foot of the bed and the closet doors. The bedspread was a deep, rich burgundy with a mound of pillows. Burgundy, purple, mauve, pink, and a few black, just a few. The mirrored dresser was cherry wood, varnished so dark it was almost black. The dresser near the window matched it. Jeremy said that my bedroom looked like a man's room with a few touches added by his girlfriend. There was a black lacquer cabinet in the corner farthest away from the bathroom door. The cabinet was oriental, with cranes and stylized mountains. The crane had been part of my father's livery. When I bought it, I remembered thinking he would have liked it. There was a philodendron plant on top of it, grown so long that the vines fell like green hair around the beautiful wood. I looked around the room, and suddenly it felt like it wasn't mine, and I didn't belong here. I turned back to Doyle. "As if it makes a difference to you what color my bedroom is." He didn't flinch, but his face became even more unreadable, more passive, a trace of arrogance creeping in, and it reminded me of Sholto's courtly mask. The comment had been mean and meant to be. I was angry with him for not killing Nuris for me, angry with him for forcing me to do what had to be done, angry with him for everything, even the things that weren't his fault. He watched me with cool eyes.
"You're quite right, Princess Meredith. Your bedroom is no concern of mine. I am a court gelding."
I shook my head. "No, that's not the problem. You're not a gelding. None of you are. She just won't share." He shrugged, making it look graceful. The movement caused him to wince. "How is your wound?" I asked.
"You were angry with me seconds ago. Now you are not? Why?"
I tried to put it into words. "It's not your fault."
"What is not my fault?"
"You did not endanger me. You saved my life. You didn't send the sluagh after me. You didn't cause the hand of flesh to manifest tonight. It's not your fault. I'm angry and I want to blame someone, but you shouldn't pay the price for other people's shit." He raised black-on-black eyebrows at that.
"A most enlightened attitude for a princess."
I shook my head. "Drop the title, Doyle. I'm Meredith, just Meredith." The eyebrows went up even farther, until his eyes looked impossibly wide, and his expression actually made me laugh. The laughter sounded normal, felt good. I sat down on the edge of the bed and shook my head. "I didn't think I'd be laughing tonight." He knelt in front of me.
"You have killed before. Why is this different?"
I looked at him, surprised that he'd understood exactly what was bothering me. Why was it so important that I kill Nuris?
A she comes into their power through ritual, but that doesn't mean that the power will manifest itself. After the first time the power is used, then the she must bloody themselves in combat.
He put a hand on the bed on either side of me, but not touching.
It is a kind of blood sacrifice. It will ensure that the powers do not go back to sleep, but continue to grow.
"Blood makes the crops grow," I said. He nodded.
"Death magic is the oldest of all magics, Princess."
He gave that small smile.
"Meredith,"
he said my name softly. "So you had me chop Nuris up so that my powers wouldn't go dormant again?" He nodded again. I looked into that serious face. "You said a she comes into their power after a ritual. I had no ritual."
"The night you spent with the Rowan was your ritual."
I shook my head. "No, Doyle. We did nothing ritualistic that night."
"There are many rituals for awakening the power, Meredith. Combat, sacrifice, sex, and many more. It is not surprising that your power chose sex. You are descended from 3 different fertility deities."
5, actually. But I still don't understand.
"Your Rowan was covered in Branwen's tears. For that one night, he acted the part of a she-lover for you. He brought on your secondary powers.
I knew it was magical, but I didn't know. My voice trailed off. I frowned at him. It seems like there should be more to it than just good sex.
Why? It is sex that makes the miracle of life. What could be greater than that?
The magic healed Rowan, gave him back his sealskin. I didn't try to heal him because I didn't know I could. Doyle sat down beside the bed, his long legs curled up against the dresser.
Healing one's skinless Rowan is nothing. I have seen she raise mountains from the sea or flood entire cities when they came into their power. You were lucky.
I was suddenly scared. You mean my coming into my powers could have caused some great natural disaster?
Yes.
You'd think someone would have warned me, I said.
No one knew you were leaving us, so we could give you no parting advice. And no one knew that you had secondary powers, Meredith. The Queen was convinced that if 7 years with Griffin in your bed and years of duels had not awakened your powers, then they were not there to waken.
Why now? I asked. Why, after all these years?
I do not know. All I know is that you are Princess of Flesh, and you have one more hand of power that has not manifested yet.
It's rare for a she to have more than one hand of power. Why would I have two?
Your hands had melted 2 of the metal bars on the bed. 2 bars melted, 1 for each hand.
I stood and stepped away from him. How did you know that?
I watched you sleep from the balcony. I saw the headboard.
Why didn't you make yourself known to me?
At that point you were in what amounted to a drugged sleep. I doubt I could have wakened you.
Why not the night you used the spiders? The night at Alistair Norton's?
You mean the human who was worshipping the she?
That stopped me. I stared at him. What are you talking about, Doyle? When did Norton worship the she?
When he stole the power from the women using Branwen's tears, Doyle said.
No. I was there. I was nearly a victim. There was no ceremony invoking the she.
Every school child in this country is taught the one thing that the she were prohibited from doing when we were welcomed into this country.
We could not set ourselves up as gods. We could not be worshipped. I got the lecture at home from Father and at school in history class, government class.
You are the only one of us ever educated with the common humans. I forget that sometimes. The Queen was livid when she discovered Prince Esses had enrolled you in a public school.
She tried to drown me when I was 6, Doyle. She tried to drown me like a purebred puppy that came out with the wrong markings. I wouldn't think she'd have given a damn what school I went to.
I don't think I've ever seen the Queen so surprised as when Prince Esses took you and his entourage and set up housekeeping among the humans.
He smiled, a brief flash of white in that dark face.
Once she realized that the prince would not stand for your mistreatment, then she began to try and lure him back to court. She offered him much, but he refused for 10 years, long enough for you to grow from child to woman out among the humans.
If she was so upset, why did she allow so many of the unseelie court to visit us?
The Queen and the prince feared that you would grow too human if you did not see your people, though the Queen did not approve of your father's choices for his entourage.
You mean Keelan? I said.
He nodded. The Queen never understood why he insisted on choosing a fae who had no she-blood in her veins as your constant companion.
Keelan is half brownie like my grandmother.
And half goblin, Doyle said, which you do not have in your background.
The goblins are the foot soldiers of the unseelie army. The she declare war, but the goblins begin it.
You're quoting your father now, Doyle said.
Yes, I am. I was suddenly tired again. The short burst of humor, the amazing new possibilities of power, a return to the court. Nothing could keep me from a bone-numbing weariness. But one thing I had to know. You said Alistair Norton was worshipping the she. What did you mean by that?
I meant that he used ritual to invoke the she when he set up the circle of power around his bed. I recognized the symbols. You saw no ritual because even the most uneducated human would know that he was not allowed to call on she power for magic.
He did the preparation ritual before the women came, I said.
Exactly,
Doyle said. I saw a she in the mirrors, but I did not see a face. Could you sense who it was?
No, but they were powerful enough that I could not break through. All I could send you was my animal and my voice. It takes a great deal to bar me from a room.
So one of the she is allowing himself,
or herself,
Doyle said. I nodded. Or herself to be worshipped, and they gave Branwen's tears to a mortal to be used against other fae.
Normally, humans of fae descent would not qualify for full fae status, but in this case, yes.
To allow worship is a death sentence, I said.
To allow the tears to be used against another fae is to be condemned to torture for an indefinite period. Some would choose death over that.
Have you told the Queen? Doyle pushed himself to his feet.
I have told her of the she who is allowing him or herself to be worshipped, and the tears. I need to tell her that you have the hand of flesh, and you are blooded. She must also know that it is not Sholto who is the traitor, but one who spoke using the Queen's own name.
I widened my eyes at him. Are you saying that she sent just you alone against Sholto and the entire Sluagh when she thought he had gone rogue? Doyle just looked at me. Nothing personal, but you needed backup.
No. She sent me to fetch you home before Sholto left St. Louis. I arrived the night that I sent the spiders to help you. It was the next day that Sholto began traveling this way.
So someone found out the Queen wanted me home, and within 24 hours they'd made a plan to have me killed.
It would seem so,
Doyle said. You haven't left the Queen's side in what, 600, 800 years, except for assassinations?
1,023 years, to be exact.
So if she doesn't mean you to kill me, then why send you? There are other of her ravens that I trust more.
Trust more, or like more?
Doyle asked. I thought about that, then nodded. All right, like more. This is the longest conversation we've ever had, Doyle. Why did she send you, her darkness?
The Queen wants you home, Meredith, but she feared you would not believe her. I am her token to you, her darkness sent with her personal weapon in hand, with her magic in my body, to prove that she is sincere.
Why does she want me home, Doyle? She sent you before I came into my power, which was a surprise to all of us. So what changed her mind? Why am I suddenly worth keeping alive?
She never ordered your death.
She never stopped anyone from trying either. He gave a small bow.
That I cannot argue.
Then what has changed?
I do not know why, Meredith, only that she wishes it.
You never did ask enough questions, I said.
And you, Princess, always ask too many.
Maybe, but I want an answer to this question before I go back to court.
Which question is that?
I frowned at him. Why the change of heart, Doyle? I need to know before I trust my life to the court again.
If she will not share this information?
I tried to think about giving up Fairy forever because of one unanswered question. It was too big a topic for me to wrap my mind around. I don't know, Doyle, I don't know. All I do know is that I'm tired.
With your permission, I will use the bathroom mirror to contact the Queen and make my report.
I nodded. Help yourself. He gave as much of a bow as the crowded bedroom would allow and moved toward the bathroom door, which was around the corner, out of sight from where we stood. How did you know where the bathroom was? I asked. He glanced back at me, face pleasant, unreadable.
I've seen the rest of the apartment. Where else could it be?
I looked at him and didn't believe him. Either it didn't show on my face, or he chose to ignore it, because he walked around the corner. I heard the bathroom door open and close. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to remember where I'd put the sleeping bags. Doyle had saved my life tonight. The least I could do was make him comfortable. For my life, I guess I could have offered him the bed, But I was achingly tired, and I wanted the bed. Besides, until I knew exactly why he'd saved me tonight, I was holding off on the big gratitude. There are things worse than death at the unseelie court. Nerys was a perfect example. The Queen's mark would not be violated by such a spell, so until I was certain down to the very fiber of my being that I was not being saved for some awful fate, I'd hold on to my gratitude. I found the sleeping bags in the small closet in the living room. I had them unrolled on the foot of the bed, airing, when I heard the shouting from the bathroom. Doyle's voice was raised in anger. The Queen's darkness and the Queen were having a fight, or so it seemed. I wondered if he'd tell me what the fight was about, or if it would be just one more secret to keep. Chapter 18. I went to the closed bathroom door. Doyle's raised voice was saying, "Please, my lady, do not make me do this." I don't know what else I would have heard, because he came to the door then and opened it a crack. "Yes, Princess." "If you could stay in there for a few minutes longer, I'm going to get dressed for bed." He acknowledged it with a nod. He did not invite me in to see my aunt through the mirror. He did not try to explain the fight. He simply closed the door. I could hear their voices but faintly now. No more yelling. They didn't want me to know what the fight was about. I was guessing it had something to do with me. What did Doyle not want to do so badly that he'd argue with his Queen? He didn't mean to kill me, and beyond that tonight, I wasn't sure I cared. I turned the overhead light off and switched on the small Tiffany-shaded lamp beside the bed. The overhead light always seemed too bright for a bedroom. The fact that I was willing to turn off any light meant I was feeling better. Calmer, at least. My usual sleepwear runs high to lingerie. I like the feel of silk and satin against my skin, but it seemed almost cruel to Doyle. It was the royal's privilege to sleep with her bodyguards, her ravens, until one of them made her pregnant. Then she wed that one and didn't sleep with the rest. Andaeus could have freed them to have other lovers, but she chose not to. Unless they slept with her, they slept with no one. They'd been sleeping with no one for a very long time. I finally settled for a silk nightshirt that fell to my knees. It had short sleeves and revealed only a thin V of skin high up on my chest. It covered more than anything else in the drawer. But without a bra, my breast pressed against the thin material, showing my nipples like thumbs pressed against the thin cloth. The silk was a vibrant royal purple and looked very good against my skin and hair. I was trying not to flash Doyle, but I was vain enough not to want to look frumpy. I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like a woman waiting for her lover, except for the cuts. I raised my arms to the glass. Nerys' claws had traced my forearms in angry red lines. The gash on the left forearm was still seeping blood. Did it need stitches? I usually healed without needing them, but it should have stopped bleeding by now. I raised the nightshirt up enough to see the wound on my thigh. It was a puncture wound very high up. She'd been trying to pierce the femoral artery. She'd meant to kill me, but I'd killed her instead. I still felt nothing about her death. It was a vast, numb place. Maybe tomorrow I'd feel bad, or maybe I wouldn't. Sometimes you just stayed numb, because anything else was not helpful. Sanity relied on numbness sometimes. I stared at myself in the mirror, and even my face was empty. My eyes held that dull, startled look that had more to do with shock than anything else. The last time I'd seen this look on my face had been after the last duel, when I knew finally that the duels would never stop until I was dead, the night I'd made my decision to run, to hide. The invitation to return to Ferry was only hours old, and already I looked like a shell-shock victim. I raised my arms again and stared at the claw marks. In a way, I'd paid the price for my return to Ferry. I'd paid in blood, flesh, pain, the coin of the unseelie court. The Queen had invited me back and given me her promise of safety, but I knew her. She'd still want to punish me for running, for hiding, for defeating her best efforts at hunting me down. To say that my aunt is not a graceful loser is an understatement of universe-shattering proportions. There was a knock on the bathroom door.
"May I come out?" Doyle asked.
"I'm trying to decide that now," I said.
"Excuse me?" he asked.
"Fine, come out," I said. Doyle had draped the straps of the sword sheath over his bare chest, the hilt rolled upside down, slightly to one side of his ribs, like a gun in a shoulder holster. The strap seemed loose, as if he'd taken off something that had been helping hold it in place. I'd never seen Doyle when he wasn't covered from neck to ankle. Even at high summer he rarely wore short sleeves, just lighter cloth. He had a silver ring in his left nipple. It was a startling thing against the utter blackness of his skin. The wound rode above the swell of his left pectoral muscle. The scarlet of the wound looked almost decorative against his chest, like some elaborate makeup meant to tease the eye.
"How badly are you hurt?"
he asked. I could ask you the same thing.
"I carry no mortal blood, Princess. I will heal. I ask you again, how badly are you injured?"
"I'm wondering if I need stitches on the arm and—" I started to raise the nightshirt on the puncture wound, but stopped in mid-motion. The Shii are comfortable around nudity, but I'd always tried to be more circumspect around the guards. "The puncture wound on my thigh, I'm wondering how deep it is." I let the purple silk fall back into place without pointing out the wound. It was very high up on my thigh, and I was still not wearing underwear. I often didn't to bed. Habit. Now I wished I had put some on. Even though Doyle couldn't tell what I was or wasn't wearing under the nightshirt, I felt suddenly underdressed. I'd have teased Jeremy, but I wouldn't have teased Uther, and I wouldn't tease Doyle for very similar reasons. They were both cut off from that part of themselves, Uther because he'd been exiled and there were no women of his stature, Doyle on the whim of his queen. He picked up the sleeping bags and laid them on the floor between the bed and the wall. Then he sat on the end of the bed.
"May I see the wound, Princess?"
I sat down on the edge of the bed beside him, smoothing the nightshirt down around me. I held my left arm out to him. He used both his hands to raise the arm up, bending it at the elbow so he could see the wound better. His fingers felt larger than they should have, more intimate than they were.
"It is deep. Some of the muscles are torn. It must hurt."
He looked at me when he said the last. "I can't seem to feel much of anything right now," I said. He laid his hand on my forehead. His hand felt so warm it was almost hot.
"You are cool to the touch, Princess."
He shook his head.
"I should have noticed earlier. You are in shock, not severe, but it was careless of me not to notice. You need healing and warmth."
I took my hand back from him. The feel of his fingers sliding along my skin as I drew away from him made me look away so he wouldn't see it in my face. "Since neither of us can heal by touch, I think I'll have to settle for some bandages and the warmth."
"I can heal by magic," he said.
I looked at him. His face was very careful, unreadable. "I've never seen you do it at court."
"It is a more intimate method than the touch of hands. At court there are healers much more powerful than I. My own small abilities in the area of healing are not needed."
He held his hands out toward me.
"I can heal you, Princess, or would you prefer a trip to the emergency room and stitches? Either way, the bleeding must be stopped."
Stitches are not my favorite thing. I laid my hand in his. He bent the arm at the elbow again, clasping his hand in my hand, entwining our fingers. My skin looked shockingly white against his darkness, like polished jet next to mother of pearl. He placed his other hand just in back of my elbow. My arm was held gently but firmly in place. I realized that I couldn't move away from him, and I didn't know how his healing worked. "Will it hurt?" He looked at me around the edge of my arm.
"It may, a little."
He began to bend toward my arm, as if to lay a kiss on the wound. I put my free hand on his shoulder, stopping his forward movement. His skin was like warm silk. "Wait. How exactly are you going to heal me?" He gave that small smile.
"If you would wait but moments, you would see."
"I don't like surprises," I said, hand still on his shoulder. He smiled and shook his head.
"Very well."
But his hand stayed at my hand and arm. I was still being held, as if he were going to heal me whether I agreed or not.
Sholto told you that one of my names is Baron Sweet-Tongue.
I remember, I said.
He implied that it was sexual, but it is not. I can heal your wound, but not with my hands.
I stared at him for a few heartbeats. Are you saying you're going to lick the wound closed?
Yes.
I kept staring at him. Some of the court dogs can do that, but I've never heard of a she having the ability.
As Sholto said, there are benefits to not being pure she. He can regrow a severed body part, and I can lick your wound until it is healed.
I didn't try to keep the incredulity off my face. If you were any other guard, I'd accuse you of looking for an excuse to put your mouth on me. He smiled, and this time it was brighter, more humor in it.
If my fellow ravens were trying to trick you into this, it would not be your arm they were wanting to touch.
I had to smile. You've made your point. All right. Get the bleeding stopped if you can. I really don't want to go to the emergency room tonight. I dropped my arm from his shoulder. Proceed. He bent toward my arm, slowly, talking as he moved.
I will try to make it as painless as possible.
His breath was almost burningly hot against my skin. Then his tongue licked lightly over the wound. I jumped. He rolled his eyes up to me without moving his face back from my arm.
Did I hurt you, Princess?
I shook my head, not sure I trusted my voice. He bent back to the wound. He licked the length of the wound twice, very slowly. Then his tongue slid inside the wound. The pain was sharp, immediate, and it brought a gasp to my throat. He didn't pull away this time, but pressed his mouth closer to my skin. His eyes closed as his tongue probed the wound, bringing small, sharp pain sensations like tiny electric shocks. With every small pain, things low in my body tightened and released. It was as if the nerves he touched were attached to other things that had nothing to do with my arm. He began to lick the wound in long, slow movements. His eyes were still closed, and I was near enough to see the black lashes, black on black against his cheeks. There was almost no pain now, just the sensation of his tongue sliding over me. The feel of his mouth against me sped my heart, made my breath catch in my throat. His earrings caught the light, reflecting it in silver glitter, as if the curve of his ears had been set in silver. Warmth began to gather at the wound. It felt very like being healed by touch now. That growing warmth, the energy vibrating against my skin, inside my skin, was almost identical. Doyle drew back from my arm, eyes half closed, mouth slack. He looked like he was waking from a dream, or as if he'd been interrupted in more intimate things. He released my arm, slowly, almost reluctantly. His voice came slow, hoarse.
It has been long since I have done this. I'd forgotten how it feels to heal.
I bent my arm back so I could see the wound, and there was no wound. I touched the skin with fingertips. The skin was smooth, untouched, still damp from Doyle's tongue, still warm to the touch, as if some of that magic clung to the skin. It's perfect. There's not even a scar.
You sound surprised.
Pleased, more like. He gave a small bow, still sitting on the edge of the bed.
So happy to have been of service to my princess.
I forgot the extra pillows. I stood and started to move toward the closet. He grabbed my wrist.
You are bleeding.
I glanced down at my arm, and it was still healed.
Your leg, princess.
I looked down and found blood trickling down my right leg. Damn.
Lie down on the bed and let me look at the wound.
He still held my wrist and tried to pull me down on the bed. I resisted, and he released me.
It should not still be bleeding, Princess Meredith. Let me heal it as I did your arm.
It's very high up on my thigh, Doyle.
The hag was trying to pierce your femoral artery.
Yes, I said.
I must insist on seeing the wound, Princess. It is too vital an area to be ignored.
It's very high up on my thigh, I said again.
I understand that,
he said.
Now please lie down and let me look at it."
"I'm not wearing anything under this shirt," I said.
"Oh," he said.
Emotions played across his face so quickly I couldn't read them, like clouds passing over a field on a windy day. Finally, he said,
"Perhaps you could put something on so that I might look at the wound."
"Good idea," I said. I opened the dresser drawer that held my unmentionables. The panties, like the sleepwear, run high to satin, silk, and lace. I finally picked a pair of plain black satin, no frills, no lace, no peekaboo panels. It was the closest to conservative that I owned. I glanced back at Doyle. He had turned his back on me without being asked. I slipped the underwear on, made sure the shirt was in place, and said, "You can look now." He turned, and his face was very solemn.
"Most of the court ladies would not have thought to warn me, some to tease, and some simply because it would not occur to them to tell me. Nudity is common enough in the courts. Why did you think to tell me?"
"Some of the guards tease, play, slap, and tickle, and I wouldn't have warned one of them. It would be just another part of the game. But you never play the game, Doyle. You are always apart from it. To have just lain down in the bed and spread would have been cruel." He nodded.
"Yes, it would have been. So many of the court treat those of us who remain aloof like eunuchs, as if we feel nothing. But I would rather have no touch of soft flesh than to be teased up to that point, than have no release. That is worse than nothing at all to me."
"Is the Queen still refusing to even allow you to touch yourselves?" He looked down at the ground, and I realized I had overstepped polite questioning. "My apologies, Doyle. We are not close enough for such a question." He spoke without looking up.
"You are the most polite of all the unseelie royals. The Queen saw your niceties as a weakness."
He looked up at me, eyes searching my face.
"But those of us in the guard appreciated it. It was always a relief to be given guard duty over you, because we weren't afraid of you."
"I wasn't powerful enough for you to fear me," I said.
"No, Princess, I don't mean your magic. I mean we didn't fear your cruelty. Prince Kell has inherited his mother's sense of humor."
"He's a sadist, you mean?" He nodded.
"In every way. Now lie down on the bed and let me look at your wound. If I let you bleed to death for modesty's sake, the Queen might make me a eunuch."
"You are her darkness, her right hand. She would not lose you over me."
"I think you undervalue yourself and overvalue me."
He held his hand out to me.
"Please, Princess, lie down."
I took the offered hand and climbed onto the bed on my knees. "Would you please call me Meredith? It's been years since I heard Princess this and Princess that. I'll get my fill of it once I'm back in Cahokia. For tonight, let's drop the titles." He gave a small bow at the neck.
"As you wish, Meredith."
I let him help me climb into the middle of the bed, though I didn't need the help, partly because the older she liked helping, and partly for the feel of his hand in mine. I ended lying with my head cradled in the wealth of small pillows on the bed. Propped up, I had a perfect view down the line of my body. Doyle knelt to one side of my leg.
"If you please, Princess."
"Meredith," I said. He nodded.
"If you please, Meredith."
I raised the dark purple silk until the wound showed. The puncture was high enough that black panties showed under the raised nightshirt. He used his hands to examine the wound, pulling the skin, pressing on it. It hurt, and not a good kind of hurt, as if there was more damage than I'd realized. Blood flowed faster, but it certainly wasn't enough for an artery. I'd have bled to death long ago if the femoral had been punctured. He raised up, hands in his lap.
"The wound is very deep, and I think there is some muscle damage."
"It didn't hurt that much until you started touching it."
"If I do not heal it tonight, you'll be lame by tomorrow, and we'll be going to that emergency room. It might require surgery, stitching on the inside of your leg. Or I can heal it now."
"I vote for now," I said. He gave a smile.
"Good. I would hate to have to explain to the Queen why I brought you home limping when I could have healed you."
He started to lean over my leg, then raised up.
"This would be easier if I moved."
"You're the healer. Do what you need to do," I said. He moved between my legs, and I had to open them just to give him room for his knees. It took some maneuvering and some, "Excuse me, princesses," but he finally ended lying flat on his stomach, his hands cupping my thighs. His gaze moved up along my body until he met my eyes. Just staring down at him in this position made my pulse jump in my throat. I tried for it not to show on my face, and I think I failed. He blew his breath like a warm wind against the skin of my thigh. He looked at my face while he did it, and I realized it had been deliberate, and I don't think it had anything to do with healing me. He raised back from my skin. "Forgive me, but it is not merely sex one misses, but the small intimacies, the look on a woman's face when she reacts to your touch." He flicked his tongue in a quick motion over my skin. "That small intake of breath as her body begins to rise to meet your touch." He lay between my legs, staring up at me. I looked down the line of his body. His hair lay in a thick black rope across the bare skin of his back, trailing over the tight smoothness of his jeans. When I met his eyes again, they held that look that fills a man's eyes when he is sure that you will not tell him no, no matter what he asks. Doyle hadn't earned that look. Not yet. "You aren't supposed to tease, remember?" He rubbed his chin back and forth over my thigh as he spoke. "I normally don't allow myself to be maneuvered into such a compromising position, but I find that once I am here, it is very difficult not to take some advantage." He bit my thigh, gently, and when that made me gasp, he set his teeth in my skin harder. It bowed my spine, made me cry out. When I could look again, he'd left a red imprint of his teeth in my thigh. It had been so long since I'd had a lover that not only would, but wanted to leave my body marked. His voice came purringly deep. "That was wonderful." "Tease me, and I'll tease back." I tried for it to be a warning, but my voice was too breathy. "But you are all the way up there, and I am down here." His grip tightened on my thighs. The strength in his hands was immense. I understood what he was implying. He was strong enough to hold me in place with just his hands on my thighs. I could sit up, but I couldn't really get away. A tension in my body that I hadn't even known was there eased. I relaxed under his hands, settling back against the bed. There were things that I'd been missing that had little to do with orgasm. Doyle would never look up at me with slow horror on his face at something I'd asked him to do. He would never make me feel like a monster because of the things my body craved. I worked the silk of the nightshirt out from under my back, then pulled it over my body, over my head. I raised up, sitting above him. That dark knowledge in his eyes was gone, chased away by sheer need. It was so raw on his face. I knew I'd taken the game too far. I held the nightshirt in front of my breasts, not sure how to apologize without making things more awkward than they already were. "No," he said. "Don't cover them. You surprised me, that's all." "No, Doyle. We can't finish this, and for you especially. I'm sorry." I started to slip the shirt back on. His fingers tightened painfully around my thighs, fingertips digging into the skin. He made me gasp and look at him with the shirt only on my arms. His voice was dark with command, a barely contained rage that made his eyes shine like black jewels. "No!" That one word froze me where I was, left me staring down at him with wide eyes and my heart beating like a trapped thing in my throat. "No," he said, voice only a breath less severe. "No, I want to see them. I'm going to make you writhe, my princess, and I want to watch your body while I do it." I let the shirt fall to the bed and sat up, as close to him as I could get. His grip on my thighs had passed the point of pleasure and become simply pain. But that, too, under the right set of circumstances, was a kind of pleasure. His fingers eased back just a little, and I saw that he'd left the marks of his fingernails in my thighs, the little half-moon marks filled with blood as I watched. He started to move his hands out from under my thighs, but I shook my head no. You're down there, and I'm up here, remember? He didn't argue, just settled his hands back around my thighs, not hurting this time, just solid enough that I couldn't move away. I ran my hands over my stomach, upward to cup my breasts, then lay down propped against the pillows so he could see me. He stared at me for long seconds, as if he'd memorized the way my body lay among the dark-colored pillows. Then his mouth settled against the wound. He licked it with thick, slow movements of his tongue. Then his mouth locked over the wound, and he began to suck. He drew on the skin so tightly that it hurt, as if he were sucking some deep poison out of the wound. The pain raised me up, and he rolled his eyes to me full of that dark knowledge that he hadn't earned. I laid back against the bed with the pressure of his mouth on my thigh, his strong fingers digging into my thighs hard enough that I knew tomorrow I'd be bruised. My skin had started to glow, glimmering in the soft bedroom light. I stared down at him, but his eyes were turned downward, concentrating on his work. The warmth began to grow under the pressure of his mouth, to fill the wound like warm water poured down the hole in my skin. Doyle began to glow. His bare skin shone like moonlight on a puddle of water at night, except this moonlight was coming from inside him to shimmer in black shapes of light and dark underneath his skin. The warmth of the healing beat against my thigh like a second pulse. His mouth locked against me, pulling at that pulse, as if he'd sucked me clean and empty. A warmth grew in the center of my body, and I realized that it was my own power. But it had never been like this before. The warmth in my thigh and the warmth in my body grew outward like two pools of heat, out and out, larger and larger, until my body was eaten with heat, and my skin glowed white and pure with a dance underneath like water. The two powers flowed against each other, and for a heartbeat, Doyle's healing warmth floated on the surface of my heat. Then the two powers spilled into one another, merging into one rush of spine-bowing, skin-dancing, body-tightening magic. Doyle raised his face up from my thigh. He cried out, "Meredith, no!" But it was too late. The power poured through us both in a rush of warmth, of heat that tightened things low in my body until there was no breath. Then the power spilled outward like a fist flinging open, straining for something it could not grasp. I cried out, and the power flowed out of me in a glow that left shadows in the room from my skin. I saw Doyle, as if through a haze. He was on his knees. He had one hand up as if to ward off a blow. Then the power smashed into him. I saw his head snap back, his body raise high on his knees, as if the power had arms to lift him. The dance of moonlight under his skin grew until I could see a nimbus of black light, shining like a dark rainbow around his body. He stayed for an impossible second, lifted, straining, a shining thing, so beautiful that you could only cry or go blind as you watched. Then a scream was torn from his mouth, half of pain, half of pleasure. He sagged onto the bed, catching himself with his arms. That wondrous glow began to fade as if his skin were absorbing the light, sucking it back into the depths from whence it came. I sat up, reached for him with a hand that still held a hint of that soft white light. He jerked back from me, fell off the bed in his haste, looked over the edge of it at me with wide, frightened eyes. "What have you done?" "What's wrong, Doyle?" "What's wrong?" He got to his feet, leaning against the wall suddenly as if his legs weren't quite steady. "I'm not allowed a sexual release, Meredith. Not by my hand or anyone else's." "I never touched you there." He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the wall. He spoke without looking at me. "Your magic did. It ran through me like a sword." He opened his eyes, stared at me. "Do you understand now what you've done?" I finally did. "You're saying that the Queen will count this as sex?" "Yes." "I never meant for it. My power has never been like this before." "Was it like this the night you were with the Rowan?" I thought about that for a moment, then frowned. Yes and no. It wasn't exactly like this, but... I stopped in mid-sentence and stared at his chest. My look must have been astonished, because it made him stare down at himself.
What? What do you see?
Your chest wound. It's gone. My voice was soft with amazement. He ran his hands over his chest, searching the skin.
It's healed. I did not do this.
He came to the edge of the bed.
Your arms.
I looked down and saw the claw marks were gone. My arms were healed. I ran my hands over my thighs, and they weren't healed. The nail marks, filled with their small bits of blood, the red marks of his teeth, the press of his mouth that had brought a red stain to my thigh where the wound had been. Why is everything else healed but these marks? He shook his head.
I don't know.
I stared up at him. You said that my initiation into power healed Rowan. But what if it's not just that first flush of power? What if it's part of my newfound magic? I watched him try to make sense of it.
It could be, but healing by sex is not a gift of the Unseelie Court.
It is of the Seelie Court, I said.
You are of their bloodline, he said softly. I must tell the Queen.
Tell her what? I asked.
Everything.
I crawled forward on the bed, still half naked, reaching for him. He moved out of reach, clutching at the wall as if I'd threatened him.
No, Meredith, no more. The Queen may forgive us because it was accidental, and she will be pleased that you have more powers. It may save us, but if you touch me again...
He shook his head.
She will not have pity on us if we come together again this night.
I was just going to touch your arm, Doyle. I think we should talk before you go tattling to the Queen. He moved back to the edge of the wall, just before it turned the corner out of sight.
I have just had the first release in more centuries than you can imagine, and you sit there like that.
He shook his head again.
You would just touch my arm, but my self-control is not limitless. We've proven that already. No, Meredith, one touch, and I might fall upon you and do what I've been wanting to do since I saw your breast trembling above me.
I can get dressed, I said.
That would be good, he said. But I am still going to tell her what happened.
What does she do? Take a sperm count? We didn't have sex. Why tell her?
She is the Queen of Air and Darkness. She will know. If we do not confess it, and then she finds out, the punishment will be 1,000 times worse.
Punishment? It was an accident.
I know, and that may save us.
You are not seriously saying that she will invoke the same penalty for this as if we had made deliberate love?
Death by torture, he said. I hope not, but she is within her rights to call for it.
I shook my head. No, she would not lose you after 1,000 years for an accident.
I hope not, Princess. I truly hope not.
He started around the corner toward the bathroom. Doyle, I called. He came back around the corner.
Yes, Princess.
If she tells you that we're going to be executed for this, there is one bright spot. He put his head to one side in a bird-like movement.
And that would be?
We can have sex. Real sex. Flesh into flesh. If we're going to be executed for something, we might as well be guilty of it. Emotions chased across his face. Again, I couldn't read them. Then finally a smile.
I never thought I could face my Queen with this news and have a divided mind on what I want her to say. You are a tempting thing, Meredith, a thing that a man might trade his life for.
I don't want your life, Doyle, just your body. That sent him laughing into the bathroom, which was better than crying. I had the nightshirt back on and was tucked under the covers by the time he came back out. He was solemn-faced, but said,
We are not going to be punished, though she has made some hint that she would like to see you heal with this newfound power.
I don't do her little public sex shows, I said.
I know that, and so does she, but she is curious about it.
Let her be curious. So we aren't going to be executed, either of us,
"No," he said.
"Why don't you look happier?" I asked.
"I didn't bring a change of clothes."
It took me a second to realize what he meant. I dug him out a pair of men's silk boxers. They were a little snug through the hips because he and Rowan were not really the same size, but they would fit. He took the boxers and went back into the bathroom. I thought he'd be quick and come back out to sleep, but I heard the shower turn on. I finally tossed down some pillows on top of the sleeping bags and turned over to try and sleep. I wasn't sure I would be able to sleep, but Doyle stayed in the bathroom a long time. The last thing I heard before sleep rolled over me was the sound of the blow-dryer. I never heard him come out of the bathroom. I simply woke up the next day and he was standing over me with hot tea in one hand and our plane tickets in the other. I didn't know if Doyle had used the sleeping bags or if he slept at all. Chapter 19. Doyle graciously let me take the window seat. He sat very straight in his chair, hands in a death grip on the arms, seatbelt buckled. He closed his eyes when the plane took off. Normally, I like watching the ground get farther away, but today watching Doyle turn gray around the edges was much more fun. "How can you possibly be afraid of flying?" I asked. He kept his eyes closed, but answered me.
"I'm not afraid of flying. I am afraid of flying in airplanes."
His voice sounded very reasonable, as if it all made perfect sense. "So you could ride a flying steed and not be afraid?" He nodded, finally opening his eyes as the plane leveled off.
"I have ridden the beasts of the air many times."
"So why do planes bother you?" He looked at me as if I should have known the answer.
"It is the metal, Princess Meredith. I am not comfortable surrounded by so much man-made metal. It acts as a barrier between me and the earth, and I am a creature of the earth."
"As you said, Doyle, there are benefits to not being pure she. I don't have a problem with metal." He looked at me, turning just his head.
"You can do major arcana within such a metal tomb?"
I nodded. "I've never found any magic that I can't perform just as well inside a metal tomb as I can outside of one."
"That could be very useful, Princess."
The flight attendant, a tall, leggy blonde wearing nearly perfect makeup, paused by Doyle's seat, bending over enough to make sure he got a look at her cleavage, if he wanted it. She'd made sure he had a chance at a view every time she came by his seat. She'd come by 3 times in the last 20 minutes to ask if he wanted anything at all. He declined. I asked for a red wine. She'd brought my wine this time. Because it was first class, it was actually served in a long-stemmed glass, the better to spill it all over yourself when the plane hit turbulence, which it did. The plane bucked and swerved so badly that I gave the wine back to the flight attendant, and she gave me a handful of napkins for my hand. Doyle closed his eyes again and kept repeating to all her questions,
"No, thank you, I'm fine."
She didn't actually offer to throw off her clothes and have sex on the floor of the plane, but the invitation was clear. If Doyle heard the invitation, he managed to ignore it beautifully. I don't know if he actually didn't realize she was hitting on him, or if he was just accustomed to human women acting like fools. She finally got the hint and wandered off. She had to grip the backs of the seats as she moved down the plane, or she'd have fallen. It was bad turbulence. Doyle looked grayish. I think it was his version of turning green. "Are you all right?" He squeezed his eyes more tightly shut.
"I will be fine once we are safely on the ground."
"Is there anything I can do to help the time pass quicker?" He opened his eyes just a slit.
"I think the stewardess made that offer already."
"Stewardess is a sexist term," I said. "It's flight attendant. So you did pick up on her hints."
"I don't think squeezing my thigh and brushing my shoulder with her breasts count as hints. More invitations."
"You ignored her beautifully."
"I have had much practice."
The plane rocked violently enough that even I wasn't happy. Doyle squeezed his eyes shut again.
"Do you really want to help this flight pass more quickly?"
"I owe you at least that much after you flashed your official guard badge and we both got on the plane with our weapons. I know legally we're both allowed to carry in the U.S., but it doesn't usually go that smooth or that quick."
"It helped that the police escorted us to the gates, Princess."
He'd been very carefully calling me Princess or Princess Meredith since I woke up this morning. We were no longer on a first-name basis. The cops seemed eager to get me on the plane.
They feared you might get assassinated on their turf. They did not want the responsibility for your safety.
So that's how you got me on the plane armed. He nodded, eyes still closed.
I told them that with only one bodyguard it would be safer if you yourself were armed. Everyone agreed.
Sholto had dropped off the Ladysmith 9mm. I actually had an inner pants holster for it that fit nicely for a front cross draw. I usually wore it at my back covered by a jacket, but the police had given me carte blanche to carry weapons, so I didn't have to worry about hiding it. I had a 10-inch knife in a side sheath, the tip of which was tied around my leg with a leather thong for a fast draw, like an Old West gunfighter. The leather thong also made the sheath fit the movement of my leg better. Without a sheath tied off, you ended up having to move it every time you shifted position, or it tended to poke into your body or get caught on things. I had a Spyderco folding knife clipped over the underwire of my bra. I always carried at least 2 blades at court, just a rule. The guns would only be allowed in certain parts of the Scythen, the fairy mounds, but I'd be allowed to keep the knives. Before the banquet tonight, in my honor, so Doyle informed me, I'd add more blades. A girl could never have too much jewelry or too much weaponry. Doyle had mortal dread in the back sheath, the hilt sticking out from under his shoulder from a cross-draw like a gun shoulder holster. He had his own gym bag full of weapons. When I'd asked him why he hadn't used them against the Sluagh, he'd said,
"Nothing else I had with me would bring them true death. I wanted them to know that I was serious."
Frankly, I've always found that blowing a hole bigger than a fist out someone's back lets them know you're serious. But many of the Guard feel that guns are inferior weapons. They carry them out among the humans, but guns are almost never used among ourselves, except in times of war. That Doyle had even packed a gun meant that things were bad. Or maybe there'd been a policy change while I was away. If the other guards were carrying guns, then I'd know. The plane dipped so suddenly that even I gasped. Doyle moaned.
"Talk to me, Meredith."
"About what?"
"Anything,"
he said, voice tight. "We could talk about last night," I said. He opened his eyes just enough to glare at me. The plane took another dive, his eyes snapped shut, and he almost whispered,
"Tell me a story."
"I'm not very good at stories."
"Please, Meredith."
He called me Meredith, an improvement. "I can tell you a story that you already know."
"Fine,"
he said. My grandfather on my mother's side is the Cruel. Other than being a complete and utter bastard, he earned the name because he fathered 3 sons that were monsters even by Fae standards. No blooded Fae woman would sleep with him after the birth of his sons. He'd been told that he could father normal children if he found someone of Fae blood who would willingly sleep with him. I peered at Doyle's closed eyes and blank face.
"Please continue,"
he said. Gran is half brownie and half human. She was willing to sleep with him because she wanted more than anything to be a part of the Seelie court. Silently, because it wasn't part of the story, I didn't blame Gran. She more than even myself understood what it was like to tread 2 very different worlds. The plane had straightened but was still shuddering as wind buffeted it from every side. A rough flight. "Are you bored yet?" I asked.
"Anything you say will be most fascinating until we reach the ground in safety."
"You know, you're cute when you're scared." He did the open eyes to slits, glare, close eyes again.
"Please continue."
Gran bore 2 beautiful twin girls. Ur's curse was ended, and Gran was one of the ladies of the court, Ur's wife, as a matter of fact, because she'd borne him children. To my knowledge, my grandfather never touched his wife again. He was one of the fine and shining gentlemen. Gran was a little too common for him now that he was curse-free.
"He is a powerful warrior,"
Doyle said, eyes still closed. "Who?"
"That's
right. You must have fought against him in the wars in Europe."
"He was a very worthy opponent."
"Are you trying to make me feel better about him?" The plane had actually flown straight and relatively smoothly for about 3 minutes. It was enough for Doyle to open his eyes completely.
"You sounded very bitter just now."
"My grandfather beat my Gran for years. He thought if he hurt her enough he'd drive her away from court, because legally he couldn't divorce her without her permission. He couldn't put her aside because she'd given him children."
"Why did she not simply leave him?"
Because if she were no longer Ur's wife, she would no longer be welcome at court. They would never have allowed her to take her daughters with her. She stayed to make sure her children would be safe.
The Queen was most puzzled when your father invited your mother's mother to accompany the two of you into exile.
Gran was his lady of the house. She oversaw the household for him.
She was a servant, then, Doyle said.
It was my turn to glare. No, she was his right hand. They raised me together for those 10 years.
When you left the court this last time, so did your grandmother. She opened a bed and breakfast.
I've seen the write-ups in the magazines. Victoria, Good Housekeeping, Brownie's Bed and Breakfast, where you can be waited on, cooked for, by an ex-member of the royal court.
Have you not spoken with her since you left 3 years ago?
He asked. I haven't contacted anyone, Doyle. It would have endangered them. I disappeared. That means I left everything and everyone behind.
There were jewels, heirlooms that were yours by right. The Queen was amazed that you left with nothing but the clothes on your back.
Any of the jewels would have been impossible to sell without it getting back to the courts. Same with the heirlooms.
You had money that your father had put away for you.
He was watching me now, trying to understand, I think. I have been on my own for 3 years, a little over. I have taken nothing from anyone. I have been a woman on my own, free of obligation to anyone of the Fae.
Which means you can invoke virgin rights when you return to court.
I nodded. Exactly. Virgin in the old Celtic ideal was a woman who stood on her own, owing nothing to anyone for a space of time. 3 years was minimum for claiming it at court. To be virgin meant that I was outside any old feuds or grudges. I could not be forced to take sides on any issue because I stood apart from all of it. It was a way of being in the court without being of the court.
Very good, Princess, very good. You know the law and how to use it for your benefit. You are wise as well as polite. A true marvel for an unseelie royal.
Being virgin allowed me to make hotel reservations without risking the Queen's anger, I said.
She was puzzled as to why you did not wish to stay at the court. After all, you want to return to us, do you not?
I nodded. Yes, but I also want some distance until I see just how safe I'm going to be at court.
Few would risk the Queen's anger, he said.
I looked at him, searching his eyes so I would catch whatever he thought of my next words. Prince Kell would risk her anger, because she's never seriously punished him for anything he's ever done. Doyle's eyes tightened when I mentioned Kell's name, but nothing more. If I hadn't been watching for it, I wouldn't have noticed any reaction at all. Kell is her only heir, Doyle. She won't kill him, he knows that. Doyle gave me empty eyes.
What the Queen does or does not do with her son and heir is not for me to question.
Don't give the party line, Doyle, not to me. We all know what Kell is.
A powerful she-prince who has the ear of the Queen, his mother,
Doyle said, and the tone in his voice was a warning to match the words. He has only one hand of power, and his other abilities are not that great.
He is the prince of old blood, and I, for one, would not want him using that ability on me on the dueling ground. He could bring every bleeding wound I have had in over 1,000 years of battles on me at once.
I didn't say it wasn't a frightening ability, Doyle, but there are others with more powerful magic. She that can bring true death with a touch. I've seen your flame eat over a she, seen it eat them alive.
And you killed the last 2 she that challenged you to a duel, Princess Meredith.
I cheated, I said.
No, you did not. You merely used tactics that they were not prepared for. It is the mark of a good soldier to use the weapons available to him or her.
We looked at each other. Does anyone but the Queen know that I have the hand of flesh now?
Sholto knows, and his Lua. It will not be a secret by the time we land.
It may frighten any would-be challengers, I said.
To be trapped forever as a shapeless ball of flesh, never to die, never to age, merely to continue. Oh yes, Princess, I think they will be afraid. After Griffin left you, many became your enemy because they thought you powerless. They will all be remembering the insults they heaped upon you. They'll be wondering if you have come back holding a grudge.
I'm invoking virgin rights. That means that I have a clean slate, and so do they. If I acknowledge an old vendetta, then I lose my status as a virgin, and I'll be sucked right back into the middle of all this crap. I shook my head. No, I'll leave them alone if they leave me alone. You are wise beyond your years, Princess. I'm 33, Doyle. That's not a child by human years. He laughed, a small dark chuckle that made me think of what he'd looked like last night with half his clothes gone. I tried to keep the thought out of my face, and I must have succeeded because his own expression didn't change. I remember when Rome was merely a wide spot in the road, Princess. 33 years is a child to me. I let what I was thinking into my eyes. I don't remember you treating me like a child last night. He looked away, not meeting my eyes. That was a mistake. If you say so. I looked out the window, watching the clouds. Doyle was determined to pretend that last night never happened. I was tired of trying to talk about it when he so obviously didn't want to discuss it. The flight attendant came back. This time she knelt, skirt tight across her thighs. She smiled up at Doyle, magazine spread and a fan across one arm. Would you like something to read? She laid her free hand on his leg, slid her hand along the inside of his thigh. Her hand was an inch from his groin when Doyle grabbed her wrist and moved her hand. Madam, please. She knelt closer to him, one hand on either of his knees, the magazines partially hiding what she was doing. She leaned in so that her breast pressed against his legs. Please, she whispered. Please, it's been so long since I was with one of you. That got my attention. How long has it been? I asked. She blinked as if she couldn't quite concentrate on me with Doyle sitting so close. 6 weeks. Who was it? She shook her head. I can keep a secret, just don't deny me. She looked up at Doyle. Please, please. She was elf-struck. If a she had sex with a human and didn't try to tone down the magic, they can turn the human into a sort of addict. Humans that are elf-struck can actually wither and die from want of the touch of she-flesh. I leaned close to Doyle's ear, close enough that my lips brushed the edges of his earrings. I had a horrible urge to lick one of the earrings, but I didn't. It was just one of those wicked urges you get occasionally. I whispered, Take her name and phone number. We'll need to report her to the Bureau of Human and Fey Affairs. Doyle did what I asked. The flight attendant had tears of gratitude shining in her eyes when Doyle took her name, number, and address. She actually kissed his hand and might have done more if the male flight attendant hadn't ushered her away. It's illegal to have sex with humans without protecting their minds, I said. Yes, it is, Doyle said. It would be interesting to know who her she-lover was. Lovers, I think, Doyle said. I wonder if she always flies the L.A. to St. Louis run. Doyle looked at me. She might know who'd been flying back and forth to Los Angeles often enough to set up the cult that's worshipping them. One man doesn't constitute a cult, I said. You told me the woman mentioned a handful of others, some of them with ear implants, or perhaps even she themselves. That's still not a cult. It's a wizard with followers, a she-worshipping coven at best. Or a cult at worst. We have no idea how many people were involved, Princess, and the man who could have answered the question is dead. Funny how the police didn't mind me leaving the state with a murder investigation hanging over my head. I would not at all be surprised if your aunt, our queen, made some phone calls. She can be quite charming when she wants to be. And when that fails, she's scary as hell, I said. He nodded. That too. The male flight attendant took care of first class for the rest of the flight. The woman never came near us again until we were getting off the plane. Then she took Doyle's hand and said, voice urgent, You will call me, won't you? Doyle kissed her hand. Oh, yes, I will call, and you will answer every question that I put to you honestly, won't you? She nodded, tears trailing down her face. Anything you want. I had to drag Doyle away from her. I whispered, I take a chaperone with me when you go to question her. I had not intended going alone, he said. He looked at me, our faces very close because we were whispering. I learned very recently that I am not inaccessible to sexual advances. His look was very frank, open, the look I'd wanted on the plane. I will have to be more careful in the future. With that, he raised up so that he was too tall for whispering and began to walk down the narrow hallway toward the airport proper. I followed him. We left the noise of engines behind and walked toward the sound of people. Chapter 20. The people were a large, murmurous noise that swelled toward me and over me, as if I were being swallowed in a sea of noise as I walked down the concourse. The crowd walked back and forth at the opening like bits of multicolored debris, a wall of people. Doyle walked just ahead of me like an advance guard, which was exactly what he was. Our gate was in line with the broad hallway that led deeper into the airport. Doyle was at the opening of the concourse, standing to one side, waiting for me. Then through the crowd I saw a tall figure come striding toward us. Galen was dressed in layers of green and white, pale green sweater, paler green pants, and an ankle-length white duster coat floating out behind him like a cape. The sweater matched his hair, which fell in short curls to just below his ear, except for one long, thin braid. His father had been a pixie whom the queen had killed for the audacious crime of seducing one of her handmaidens. I don't believe the queen would have killed the pixie if she'd known he'd begotten a child. Children are precious, and anything that breeds, that passes the blood along, is worth keeping around. I was happy to see him, but knew if he was here, then a photographer wasn't far behind. Frankly, I'd been surprised we hadn't stepped out into a barrage of media. Princess Meredith had been missing for 3 years, and now she was coming home, alive, well. My face had been plastered across the supermarket tabloids for years. Sightings of the elven American princess had rivaled Elvis sightings. I didn't know what had been done to save me from the media frenzy, but I was grateful. I dropped my carry-on bag beside Doyle and ran to Galen. He swept me up in his arms and planted a kiss on my mouth. "Mary, good to see you, girl." His arms curved around my back, holding me a foot above the ground with ease. I've never liked my feet dangling helplessly. I wrapped my legs around his waist, and he transferred his hands from my waist to my thighs to support me. I'd been running into Galen's arms since I could remember. After my father's death, he'd been my defender among the unseelie more than once. Though being a half-breed like myself, he didn't have much more clout than I did. What he did have was 6 feet of muscle and trained warrior to back up his threat. Of course, when he swept me up in his arms at age 7, it was minus the kiss and other things. At just a little over 100, Galen was one of the youngest of Andaeus's royal guard, a mere 70 years between our ages. Among the Sidhe, it was like growing up together. The V-neck of his sweater cut low over the swell of his chest, showing a curl of chest hair that was a darker green than his hair, almost black. The sweater was pettibly soft, clinging to his body. His skin was white, but the sweater brought out the undercast of pale, pale green, so that his skin was either pearl white or a dreamlike green, depending on how the light hit it. His eyes were a green the color of new spring grass, more human than the liquid emerald of my own. But the rest of him was too unique for words. I'd thought that since I was about 14, except he wasn't who my father had promised me to, because Galen was too nice a guy. He didn't play politics well enough for my father to feel confident that Galen would live to see me grown. No, Galen spoke when silence would be wiser. It was one of the things I'd loved about him as a child and feared about him as I grew older. He danced me around the hallway to some music that only he could hear, but I could almost hear it as I looked into his eyes, traced the curve of his lips with my gaze. "I'm glad to see you, Mary." "I can tell," I said. He laughed, and it was a very human laugh. Nothing but Galen's mirth to make it special. But that had always been special enough for me. He leaned in close, whispering against my ear. "You got your hair. Your beautiful hair." I laid a gentle kiss on his cheek. "It'll grow back." There were only a few reporters, because they hadn't had enough notice to plan a large-scale assault. But most of them had a camera. Pictures of Sidhe royalty, especially if they were doing anything unusual, could always find a market. We let them snap their pictures because we couldn't stop them. Using magic against them was infringement on freedom of the press. So the Supreme Court had decreed. Reporters who routinely covered the Sidhe were often psychics in their own right, or witches. They knew when you were using magic on them. All it took was one report and you could be in civil court. Let's hear it for the First Amendment. The Fae took 2 different tacks about the reporters. Some were very decorous in public, never giving anything of interest to the paparazzi. Galen and I were of the school that you give them something to photograph, something unimportant so that they won't dig for more sensational stuff. Give them something positive, upbeat, and interesting. This was encouraged by Queen Andaeus. She'd been on a kick to give her court better, more upbeat publicity for the last 30 years or so. My lifetime. I'd been paraded with my father on spring outings. There'd been a public engagement ceremony between myself and Griffin. There was no private life if the Queen decreed it public. Someone cleared their throat, and I looked past Galen to find Berinthus. If Galen looked unique, Berinthus looked alien. His hair was the color of the sea, the oceans, the turquoise of the Mediterranean, the deeper medium blue of the Pacific, a stormy grayish blue like the ocean before a storm, sliding into a blue that was nearly black, where the water runs deep and thick like the blood of sleeping giants. The colors moved with every touch of light, melding into each other as if it wasn't hair at all. His skin was the alabaster white of my own. His eyes were blue, but the pupils were slits of black. I knew for a fact that he had a clear membrane, like a second eyelid that came up over his eyes when he was underwater. When I was 5, he taught me to swim, and I'd loved the fact that he could blink twice with one eye. He was taller than Galen, nearly 7 feet tall, as befit a god. He was wearing a royal blue trench coat open over a black designer suit, but the shirt was blue silk, with one of those high round collars that the designers are trying to sell so men don't have to wear ties anymore. Berinthus looked splendid in it all. He'd left his hair loose and flowing free around him like a second cloak, and I knew that someone else, probably my aunt, had picked his clothes for him. Left to his own devices, Berinthus was a jeans and t-shirt, or less, man. Galen and Berinthus had been 2 of the most frequent visitors to my father's house, out among the humans. Berinthus was a power among the Sidhe. He was pure old court. The Sidhe still whispered about the last duel he'd fought, long before I was born, in which a Sidhe had drowned in a summer meadow miles from any water. Berinthus, like my father, never agreed to fight a duel unless mortality was invoked. Anything less was not worth his time. Galen let me slide to the ground. I went to Berinthus, holding out both my hands in greeting. He drew his hands out of his coat pockets carefully, keeping them in loose fists until my own hands could be placed in his. He had webbing between his fingers, and he had been sensitive about it ever since a reporter in the 50s had called him the Fish Man. Hard to believe that someone once worshipped as a sea god could be embarrassed by a 20th century hack. But there it was. Berinthus had never forgotten that little bit of publicity. The webbing was completely retractable, just a thin extra line of skin between his fingers unless he chose to use it. Then he could expand the skin and swim like a fish. Though this was not a compliment to be paid out loud, ever. He took my hands in his and leaned down from his great height to plant a civilized but well-meant kiss on my cheek. I returned the favor. Berinthus liked to be civilized in public. His personal side was not for public consumption, and he had the power to make sure that even the Queen herself couldn't change his mind. Gods, even fallen ones, should be treated with a certain respect. That reporter in the 50s, the one who had plastered the Fishman headline along the worldwide news service, had died in a freak boating accident on the Mississippi that summer. The water just rose up and slapped the boat, eyewitnesses said. Strangest thing they'd ever seen. The cameras kept taking pictures. We kept ignoring it. It is good to have you back among us, Meredith. It's good to see you too, Berinthus. I hope the court is safe enough for me to make this more than an extended visit. The clear second eyelid blinked over his eyes. When he wasn't swimming, it was a sign of nervousness. That you will have to discuss with your aunt. I didn't like the sound of that. The reporter shoved a tiny tape recorder in my face. Who are you? That he had to ask meant he was on the job since I left home. Galen moved in, smiling, charming. He opened his mouth to answer, but another voice filled the bustling hush. Princess Meredith Nikes's child of peace. The man who'd spoken pushed away from the far windows where he'd been leaning. Jenkins, how unpleasant to see you, I said. He was a tall, thin man, though next to Berinthus he wasn't that tall. Jenkins had a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, so heavy that I'd asked him once why he didn't just grow a beard. He'd replied that his wife didn't like facial hair. I'd replied that I couldn't believe anyone would marry him. Jenkins had sold pictures of my father's hacked body. Not in the United States, of course. We're too civilized for that. But there are other countries, other newspapers, other magazines. People bought the pictures and published them. He was also the one who'd surprised me at the funeral and snapped pictures of me with tears trailing down my cheeks, my eyes so angry they had a glow to them. That one had been nominated for a prize of some kind. It lost, but my face and my father's dead body were worldwide news thanks to Jenkins. I still hated him for that. I heard a rumor that you'd be coming back for a visit. Are you staying the whole month until Halloween? He asked. I can't believe that anyone would risk my aunt's displeasure talking to you, I said, ignoring his question. I'd had lots of practice ignoring reporters' questions. He smiled. You'd be surprised who talks to me and about what. I didn't like the phrasing on that. It sounded vaguely threatening, vaguely personal. No, I didn't like it one little bit. Welcome home, Meredith, he said, and gave a small but strangely stylish bow. What I wanted to say to him wasn't fit for public consumption, but there were too many tape recorders. If Jenkins was here, then the television people couldn't be far behind. If he couldn't have an exclusive, he'd make sure there was a crowd. I said nothing. I let it go. He'd been baiting me since I was a child. He was only about 10 years older than I was, but he looked 20 years older, because I still looked like I was in my early 20s. Maybe I wasn't going to live forever, but I was going out well-preserved. I think that really bothered Jenkins, covering people who either didn't age or aged more slowly than he did. There were moments when I was younger that it had been a comfort that he would probably die first. You still smell like an ashtray, Jenkins. Don't you know that smoking will shorten your life expectancy? His face went hard and thin with anger. He lowered his voice and whispered, Still the little bitch of the West, hey, Mary? I've got a restraining order against you, Jenkins. Stay back 50 feet, or I'll call the cops. Barinthus came up to us and offered me his arm. He didn't have to say it. I knew better than to get into an insult match with a reporter in front of other reporters. The restraining order had been put in place after Jenkins plastered my picture all over the world. The court's attorneys had found several judges who thought that Jenkins had indeed exploited a minor and invaded my privacy. After that, he was forbidden to speak with me and had to stay back 50 feet. I think the only reason that Barinthus hadn't killed Jenkins for me was that the Sidhe would have seen that as a weakness, too. I wasn't just Sidhe royalty. I was 2 deaths away from the unseelie throne. If I couldn't protect myself from overzealous reporters, I didn't deserve to be in line for the throne. So he'd become my problem. The Queen had forbidden any of us from harming the press after Barinthus's little boating accident. Unfortunately, the only thing that would have rid me of Barry Jenkins was his death. Anything short of that and he'd just heel and crawl back after me. I blew Jenkins a kiss and walked past him on Barinthus's arm. Galen trailed behind us, fielding questions from the press. I caught parts of the story. Family reunion, home for the coming holidays, yada, yada, yada. Barinthus and I outdistanced the reporters because they were hanging back with Galen. So I asked something serious. Why has the Queen suddenly forgiven me for running away from home? Why does one usually call home the prodigal child? He returned. No riddles, Barinthus, just tell me. She has told no one what she plans, but she was most insistent that you come home as an honored guest. She wants something from you, Meredith, something only you can give her, or do for her, or for the court. What could I possibly do that the rest of you can't? If I knew, I would tell you. I leaned into Barinthus, running a hand down his arm and calling a spell. It was a small spell, like wrapping a piece of air around us so that noise bounced off. I didn't want to be overheard, and if we were being spied on by the Sidhe, no one would wonder at me doing it with the reporters around. What of Kell? Does he mean to kill me? The Queen has been most insistent to everyone. He emphasized the everyone, that you are to be unmolested while at court. She wants you back among us, Meredith, and seems willing to enforce her wish with violence. Even against her son? I asked. I don't know, but something has changed between her and her son. She is not happy with him, and no one knows quite why. I wish I had more concrete information for you, Meredith, but even the biggest gossips at court are lying low on this one. Everyone's afraid to anger either the Queen or the Prince. He touched my shoulder. We are almost certainly being spied upon.
They will be suspicious if we keep up the spell of confusion for our words."
I nodded and withdrew the spell, flinging it into the air with a thought. The noise closed around us, and I realized in the press of people that we'd been lucky not to be bumped into, which would have shattered the spell. Of course, I was walking with a 7-foot-tall blue-haired demigod, which did tend to open a path for you. Some of the Sidhe welcomed the fairy-philes, the groupies, but Berinthus was not one of those, and a mere glance from those eyes was enough to make almost anyone back up a step. Berinthus continued in a voice that was a little too cheerful for his normal words.
"We'll drive you from here to your grandmother's." He lowered his voice. "Though how you got the Queen to agree to visiting relatives before paying your respects to her, I do not know."
"I invoked virgin rights, which is why you're also taking me to my hotel to check in and get changed." We were at the baggage carousel now, watching the empty silver of it glide around and around.
"No one has invoked virgin rights among the Sidhe in centuries."
"It doesn't matter how long it's been, Berinthus. It's still our law." Berinthus smiled down at me.
"You were always intelligent, even as a young child, but you have grown to be clever."
"And cautious, don't forget that, because without caution, all clever will do is get you killed."
"So cynical, so true. Have you really missed us, Meredith, or did you enjoy being free of all of this?"
"Some of the politics I could do without, but—" I hugged his arm. "I've missed you, and Galen, and— Home isn't something you can pick and choose, Berinthus. It is what it is."
He leaned down to whisper, "I want you home, but I fear for you here."
I looked into those wonderful eyes and smiled. "Me too." Galen came bounding up to us, putting an arm across my shoulders and the other around Berinthus's waist.
"Just one big happy family,"
Berinthus said.
"Do not be flippant, Galen."
"Wow," Galen said.
"The mood has plummeted. What were you two talking about behind my back?"
"Where's Doyle?" I asked. Galen's smile wilted a little around the edges.
"He's gone to report to the Queen."
His smile flashed back into place.
"Your safety is now our concern."
Something must have passed on my face or Berinthus's because Galen asked, "What is wrong?" I glanced in the shiny mirrored surface in front of us. Jenkins was just outside the barrier for the carousel. He was staying back his 50 feet, more or less. Certainly far enough away that I couldn't have him arrested. "Not here, Galen." Galen glanced too and saw Jenkins.
"He really hates you, doesn't he?"
"Yes," I said.
"I've never understood his animosity toward you," Berinthus said. "Even when you were a child, he seemed to despise you."
"It does seem to have become personal, doesn't it?"
"Do you know why it's so personal for him?"
Galen asked, and there was something in the way he asked it that made me look away, to avoid his eyes. My aunt had decreed years before I was born that we could not use our darkest powers in front of a member of the press. I'd broken that rule only once, for Jenkins' personal edification. My only excuse was that I'd been 18 when my father died, 18 when Jenkins plastered my pain across the media of the world. I'd pulled his darkest fears from his mind and paraded them before his eyes. I'd made him shriek and beg. I'd left him a quivering mass curled beside a lonely country road. For a few months, he'd been kinder, gentler. Then he'd come back with a vengeance, meaner, harsher, more willing to do anything to get a story than he was before. He told me that the only way I could stop him was to kill him. I hadn't tamed him. I'd made him worse. Jenkins was what helped me learn the lesson that you either kill your enemies or you leave them the fuck alone. My suitcase was on one of the first to come sliding along the carousel. Galen picked it up.
"Your chariot awaits, my lady."
I looked at him. If it had just been Galen, I might have believed it, but Berinthus wouldn't do the publicity stunts, and a chariot was definitely a stunt.
"Queen Andea sent her own personal car for you,"
Berinthus said. I glanced from one to the other of them. She sent the black coach of the Wild Hunt for me? Why?
"Until dark this evening," Berinthus said. "It is merely a car, a limousine, and that your aunt offered it to you with me as your driver is a great honor that should not easily be dismissed."
I stepped in close to him and lowered my voice as if the waiting reporters could hear us. I couldn't keep calling magic to hide our words because, though I couldn't sense it, I couldn't be sure we weren't observed. "It's too great an honor, Barinthus. What's going on? I don't usually get the royal treatment from my relatives." He looked down at me, silent so long I thought he wouldn't answer. "I do not know, Meredith," he said finally. "We'll talk in the car," Galen said, smiling and waving for the reporters. He shepherded us out to the automatic doors. The limo was waiting like a sleek black shark. Even the windows were tinted black so that you could see nothing of what lay inside. I stopped on the sidewalk. The two men walked past me, then stopped, looking back at me. "What's wrong?" Galen asked. "Just wondering what might have crawled into the car while we were inside the airport." They glanced at each other, then back to me. "The car was empty when we left it here," Galen said. Barinthus was more practical. "I give my most solemn word that to my knowledge the car is empty." I smiled at him, but it wasn't a happy smile. "You always were cautious." "Let us say that I do not give my word on things that I cannot control." "Like my aunt's whims," I said. He gave a small bow that swirled his hair like a multi-hued curtain. "Indeed." My aunt had chosen well. There were 3 times 3 times 3 royal bodyguards, 27 warriors dedicated to my aunt's every wish. Of those, the 2 I would have trusted most were standing beside me. Andaeus wanted me to feel secure. Why? My security or lack thereof had never interested her before. Barinthus's words came back to me. The Queen wanted something from me, something only I could give her, or do for her, or for the court. The question was, what was that one thing that only I could do? Off the top of my head, I couldn't think of a single thing that only I could give her. "In the car, children," Galen said through smiling, gritted teeth. There was a television news van in the distance, caught in traffic but coming closer. If they pulled in and blocked our escape, which had happened in the past, we'd have other troubles than just my paranoia, no matter how well justified that paranoia happened to be. Barinthus took keys out of his pocket and hit a button on the keychain. The trunk popped open with a hiss of escaping air, like it was hermetically sealed. Galen put my suitcase in it and held his hand out for my carry-on bag. I shook my head. "I'll keep this with me." Galen didn't ask why. He knew, or could guess. I wouldn't have come home without more than the weapons I was carrying. Barinthus held the rear door for me. "The news van will be here soon, Meredith. If we are to make a, how do they say, clean getaway, we must do so now." I took half a step toward that open door and stopped. The upholstery was black. Everything was black. The car had too long a history not to ring every psychic bell I had. The power from that open door crept along my skin and raised the hair on my arms. It was the dark coach of the wild hunt sometimes, even if there were no tricks waiting inside it now. It was an object of wild power, and that power flowed over me. "By the Lord and the Lady, Mary," Galen said. He moved past me and slid into the blackness of the car. He slid all the way in out of sight, then slid back out, holding his pale hand out to me. "It won't bite, Mary." "Promise," I said. "Promise," he said, smiling. I took his hand, and he drew me toward the open door. "Of course, I never promised that I wouldn't bite." He pulled me into the car, both of us laughing. It was good to be home.